Like millions of other players, Minecraft has remained a large part of my life. This year, I'll have played Minecraft for a full decade. Now, I'll take us on just one of those millions of journeys through the game. It all started on one fateful evening in 2014. My parents were out on a date and my brother and I were stuck at home. To pass the time, he decided to try and download this game he'd been hearing about called Minecraft. At first we downloaded a knockoff clone, but after half an hour, we had our hands on the real thing. We would fill much of our allotted screen time with it. I had a few worlds that I can still remember. One where we made a small pyramid sort of structure that I accidentally trapped myself in because I had no idea how to move. Another was when I did the classic pastime of any 7-year-old, building a house out of valuables. However, mine was quite distinct. It was nestled in a hill and was tiny. Each block was different, and over the hill I had strips of gold, diamond, and emerald blocks. Near that was a nether reactor that I built with the help of my brother. Following that, I filled the spire to the brim with endermen. Lastly, the final world I played had a massive brick house which I built in creative and then played in survival. There were 4 floors. The bottom floor had a crafting table and some furnaces, the second was empty, the third had a bed, and the fourth contained many treasures. My brother also played on that world, building a small quartz diamond to live out of. Outside of my house there was a large plain, which had a pond which often attracted many zombies and skeletons. And behind the house, a cave entrance with some granite. I never dared to go into it though. However, much to my dismay, my tablet had some manufacturing error, which eventually rendered it unusable. Since around that time I'd been playing a lot of Minecraft, I associated the manufacturing error with Minecraft. I was very upset to lose my progress in other games I was playing, particularly in Angry Birds. So, out of spite, I quit Minecraft. Fast forward to spring of 2015, around Easter time. It had only been several months, but to me, upon reflection later, it felt like much longer. My dad got us an Xbox 360, on which he bought Minecraft. Often after getting home from school, my brother and I would take turns on the Xbox. However, we usually would only get 30 or so minutes to play each. On the weekends, however, we would often play together, whether it be on survival worlds or in a PvP arena that we built. Occasionally, we would build in creative together. The main world I would play on during the latter part of 2nd grade was a sort of desert world. I had camped out in a village, often going between survival and creative. I had dogs which I named various aspects of lightning. I also had a sort of bedrock structure that was hard for me to navigate, though I used it to spawn a lot of mobs. Memories of this first world include me building a very small target range. I remember having a lot of trouble getting the arrows that I would use for this because they were a relatively complex craft. I also frequently ventured out to a faraway mountain, which was no small feat because often I'd get stuck in shift mode and not know how to get out. The next world I played was characterized by one of those classic mountain houses, but I got lost and couldn't find my way back. Unfortunately, when going through those old worlds, I wasn't able to find it. By that point, it was the summer, and I have several memories of playing on the tutorial world, being confused by iron doors, and also fishing a lot, especially in the rain. On the next world that I played, I built a watchtower to shoot mobs from, which was a common theme in worlds from this period. It also had a strange enclosure which I don't entirely know the purpose of. A thing I often did was build a house out of precious materials in creative mode, giving myself maximum gear and then playing the game after that. One of the worlds that my brother and I played the most was this world I'll call Portal Hill, because we had a nether portal on a hill and also built an end portal on that same hill. I actually did run into the real end portal while mining. It was played partially legitimately, however the enchantments make the use of creative mode very obvious. I fished a lot, and I also have memories of breeding horses with golden apples and golden carrots. There were many features of our city made up of large boxes. I built an amazing chandelier inside of a well-designed library, and we also had a pool, a hotel that I think came from a guide, indoor fireplaces which I'm sure never caused any problems, as well as good lighting, watchtowers, a mob dungeon of sorts, Californian high-speed rail, dogs, and horse stables. Another major world we had was one where I made a house out of acacia and birchwood. Both of our homes had interesting architecture actually. In this world, I learned that leaves can in fact despawn while you're looking at them, which my brother said was impossible, and also that golden and iron nuggets were completely useless. There were many more small worlds, where I often went on many mining expeditions outside of a small house, which was often beachside made with combinations of birch and oak. I also once embarked on the challenge to build a mansion, which I would build in the mornings before summer camp. Further, my brother and I were working on a castle at one point. I also tried to map out an entire super flat world and built a roller coaster. Although we had one creative world where we competed against each other in building contests, we had another creative world which was actually collaborative. It was called Baker's Paradise. You might be able to suspect this, however, the world was centered around a bakery. We often did PvP matches until my brother would get angry, which we did in an arena that we had made. The armor was pretty terrible at first because I didn't understand enchantments. He also would often add points to his score without even winning. Another major survival world I had was this premise where I lived in a hidey hole. I had learned about sod houses in class and thought they were very interesting, so I built my house inside of a small hill, though everything else was on the surface. In this world I would experiment with a lot of potions, which got me nowhere because I didn't know that to do anything you had to start with netherwort. I also remember trying to kill rabbits to little avail because of how small and fast they were. I had some farms as well as an enchanting room whose materials I gathered legitimately. Like many of my worlds, it featured 11 different spellings of miscellaneous on my chest labels. I also had a jukebox and listened to all of the music discs. The last major thing we did on Xbox was another world, which we would often play in the late afternoons after getting home from summer camp. It had a doghouse, a ravine, looted villages, a failed attempt at an infinite lava pool, and some good vibes. After this world, there was a period where I didn't play a ton of Minecraft. This period extends to I think the summer of 2017. In this time frame, I played a lot of other games such as the Supercell games, SimCity, Jetpack Joyride, Terraria, Smashy Road, Geometry Dash, Tai Chi Panda, and so many more. Though I was still playing Minecraft on a somewhat regular basis, so even though I didn't play a ton of Minecraft like I would later, it still wasn't the previous hiatus. I had been watching quite a lot of unspeakable gaming, which, looking back, let's just say I'd probably rather not speak about that. I also watched Exploding TNT, who probably stood the test of time better. Later, I did get into Markiplier and Jacksepticeye. I remember watching Markiplier's Drunk Minecraft series, and it took me like 10 episodes to realize that they were actually drunk, and it wasn't just the ugly texture pack that made it look like their characters were drunk. It was around this point where I downloaded Minecraft on my newer tablet. I mostly still played single player at this time, but I still played a little bit of online survival games, even though I wasn't very good, particularly because I didn't have a keyboard. Even then, looking back, I think my skin should have intimidated everyone into submission. I also downloaded a few of those free-to-play maps that you can do, but I didn't play too many of them. In late summer of 2017, I started a world that I called Main Legit Forever. And it was certainly my main, and I played it legitimately. During school time, I would give updates on the weekend's progress to my friend on the bus via jokes. I can't remember any of them, but they had the vibe of, "Look at this stable I made and trapped animals in. Now I have a stable source of food." He would still laugh even though they probably weren't very funny. One of the first things I did was build a house, which I did on top of a hill. After this, I would do a lot of mining. Not only would I have an extensive grid-like strip mine, but I also created a vast quarry at Diamond Layer. It was only 2 blocks high, but it was like 50 by 100 blocks. It was huge. After that, I still needed more blocks, because I decided to make a mob spawner. Now, I had spent a long time on this mob spawner. I broke several iron pickaxes at the cobble generator, and once I'd finally finished it, after many hours of work, it didn't work at all because I built it in an extreme hills biome, which would just freeze the water that I used to push the mobs. Whoops. This was tragic because I even made a cool outer shell with watchtowers and everything. At one point I made a little parkour, which was primarily composed of iron bars after finishing a supposedly hard map on a parkour server, but I did eventually remove it. After the mob spawner failure, I decided to get an enchanting table. Now, the problem was, sugarcane and leather were hard to get. especially in Mobile Edition. I quickly gave up scavenging for the leather and just built a cow enclosure. But I still went on far-reaching expeditions for the sugarcane. Unfortunately, the sugarcane farms I had tested were not working, and I just gave up on them because I didn't understand that they weren't working because Bedrock Redstone is different from Java Redstone. Every day, I jumped down the little bridge I'd made to see the small sugarcane farm not produce much cane, and go on big walks to swamps along the river to find sugarcane. One of the reasons that this project took so long was because I was making way more bookshelves than necessary. Like 3 full extra layers, not only widthways, but also height-wise. So instead of the usual 15 bookshelves, I needed like 60. After getting my enchanting table and properly hiding it away, I would go on nether expeditions with the primary goal of getting quartz to spruce up my roof. I would die over and over again after accidentally punching a zombie pigman, where I'd literally go into the nether, wait 1 minute on a loading screen, get in, pick up my stuff, and die. Over and over, but it eventually worked out. Now, something I did for some reason in my world was make a tunnel to literally everything, but what made it worse was that I did this above ground. So, stables that are 100 blocks away, above ground tunnel. Farms, above ground tunnel. My defunct mob spawner, above ground tunnel. My nether portal, tunnel. Enchanting room, which now functioned as a museum of stuff as well, secret tunnel. And I even carpeted everything. I have no idea what went through my head. Now, the final project. I had been planning a really big storage system, so what I decided to do was hollow out an area in the ground and fill it to the brim with chests. Now, this wouldn't seem unique if it weren't for the fact that I wanted at least 1 chest for every single item. Despite my genuinely good planning of the project, it was not a good plan. It was doomed to fail. Halfway through, I thought of remodeling it in a mumbo-jumbo inspired way, which, by the way, I watched like all of Season 4 and 90 episodes of Season 5 in literally a month. Anyways, I gave up on the redesign when I realized that most blocks I wanted to use were extremely difficult to obtain. So, after many tears, I gave up on that, and did the classic sunk cost reasoning of, well, I got this far, might as well finish it. I planted a forest many times over, literally edging the Lorax for months until I gave up. So apparently, not only is a massive storage system like that completely infeasible, but it's also literally impossible. The amount of chests, which at the point of giving up had reached over 100 double chests, each with signs to label them, were rendered not as blocks but as entities. So my poor tablet would be constantly rendering all these chests and signs, which caused my game to lag beyond any reasonable metric. Like, literally 1 frame per second. Afterwards, I renamed it to Nub Times to signify how I'd grown as a player, and how I would learn from my mistakes. Okay, so if you, dear viewer, were to learn anything from that story, you would come away thinking, don't bite off more than you can chew, right? Yeah, well, I was almost 11 and did not learn from my mistakes, so I immediately tried to make a new world where I wanted to build a mansion before doing literally anything else. This may surprise you, but I'd only built a few rooms in the frame of the house before getting bored of it and stopping. Another genius strategy by me was starting a world where I wanted to get all the achievements. However, I did learn to quit early in this case. After one day where I got leather armor, I realized the scope of the task and decided to not continue. Though there were some successful small things that I did. I built a cool maze and a nice world spawn on a creative world with my brother. In my own creative world, I built a few redstone contraptions. I also really liked TNT cannons. So what I would do is I had this big shooting target and would keep score with different blocks to see how many each explosion could get. Though I only really used a few designs of cannons, so it was mostly just the dopamine of seeing the dirt go boom, and then seeing the cool patterns resulting afterwards. An interesting world to me was my plan of doing another survival kind of challenge, where I would make a base of cobblestone and then try to survive in the nether. Thing was, this was pre 1.16, so I got bored pretty quickly. What's interesting is that I apparently created some lore. It was pretty bad though. The last world I really did was what I called Civilization. The premise was that it was creative on a normal world, and I would build different levels of society. The first was medieval, the second was the 1800s, the third was modern, and the fourth was post-nuclear fallout. I started with some markets and stables with the medieval world, and then kinda copy-pasted a house made of wood and straw. It also contained a blacksmithery and a bakery, but there wasn't too much to it. The 1800s were basically entirely wood, though I did also have a sod house. To critique my architecture, the houses I built were more characteristic of the Midwest. However, I still decided it would be reasonable to build a big house next to a small dirt house, and a cotton plantation. Please don't cancel me, I was like 11. As for the modern era one, I was planning on building a few suburban houses, but they would be way too big, so I just built a red barn and some farms. Lastly, the post-fallout. I'd barricaded the entrances to a desert temple with iron blocks. I actually had found a fossil while building it, which was pretty cool. I made it like an underground shelter, with running water and plant replicators. There was also a hallway with living spaces. Now, I had lore about this, and I felt very proud of it. I thought it was so extensive and cool. You can pause the video and read it now, but I assure you, you don't need to read it to know that it's terrible. However, I did mention 00 in the books. They actually did have some weird pillar thing at 00, so that's almost interesting. In April of 2018, I had finally gotten my first computer. A few years back, my brother and I had a shared computer that we played Happy Wheels and Lego Chima on, but now I had my own computer. The first thing I did was play on a Realm server with my brother. We built a house in a swamp, and I had fun with a boat. However, this didn't last very long, and we quickly joined multiplayer. First, we played Hypixel, primarily murder mystery because it looked fun on YouTube. Later in the summer, we also would play Bedwars and Skywars somewhat. Once we tried the I Am Stone challenge, however it didn't go very well. But, back in April, my brother introduced me to a server he'd been playing on. It was called Manacube. He'd been playing the Skyblock mode, though he would mostly PvP because you could collect heads and also get good loot. At the time, he was using a panda skin, so I decided to make my own skin that matched him. And I did embrace the identity somewhat, not like a furry, but my skin had a chain which made me a gangsta supposedly. I had headphones which made me a gamer. I liked Pirates of the Caribbean, so that made me a pirate, and I would often beat people with sticks, which made me a police officer. So I would introduce myself with something along the lines of what is shown on the screen. I cannot read that out because I would die. Before I get cyberbullied, please remember that I was 10. I also would write like Jar Jar Binks in the chat. So for example, I often wrote DA instead of just typing the. In Skyblock, I built a house for us and also another war farm. However, for the most part we just goofed around in the PvP zone and collected player heads. There was this one guy named Wilbo Shakespeare who kind of terrorized us. He had a lot of money in real life, so we could buy the overpowered gear. Originally, when we started, it was only available once every year or two. However, starting a few months after we had joined, overpowered items via loot crates would be available literally every single minute holiday. Anyways, my brother would often kill him, but he was still a massive party pooper. Despite my immense cringe, I would still help people out and I was generally nice. In fact, I remember helping this guy named Captain Raider 951. After I helped him get started, he literally never came back, except once briefly in 2020 which I missed. There was this other guy that I helped who was really happy about it, and kind of created a one-sided friendship, forcing me to ghost him. Sorry dude, but I was scared. Simultaneously, I had started to play on the Parkour server on Manacube. My goal was to finish every single map once, which would end up taking years because every month new maps were released. While I was playing parkour, I had trouble on one map. I couldn't do a neo jump, which is basically when you have to jump around a block. A moderator helped me do this, and to replicate their timings, I asked them what FOV they were using. They said 98, and I am still using that same FOV. Though, to maintain the same perspective after getting a new monitor, I did change the value to 92. Additionally, I played on the survival server. I built a house, but it was kind of in a bad spot, and I think it got griefed because I didn't properly claim the territory it was on. So, I set off to build a new base. After finishing my house and building up the surrounding area and mountain that I was on, I would often walk around the area and see if anyone else had built anything. This was interesting to me because I could use this command called inspect block, which allowed me to see how long ago these blocks were placed, as well as who placed them. But I didn't spend too much time on the survival server. Most of my time was spent on the Skyblock server, and my brother and I had made a lot of friends, especially with some of the mods. However, come October, the Skyblock server was resetting. It would transition into Season 7, which would become the heyday of Manacube for me. My brother and I, like the previous season, would hang around the PvP zone quite frequently. But there was also a lot more to do now. For one, I had a really good understanding of the prices of enchantments. This allowed me to build a shop for them. During the season, the server owner updated the game to have an Ancient Trials mode. Essentially, it was like a wave game where you'd fight off progressively more dangerous mobs. Eventually, you could get a really good armor set from it. I had a bit of fun with that and had yet another hypermaxed armor set. This also would include the 5 or 6 non-vanilla enchantments on every piece. However, I would rarely go into the PvP zone with my good armor on, unless they had a scroll, which meant that you'd keep them upon death. This was the result of a traumatic experience where I lost a lot of stuff early on in Season 6. In the season, I built several automatic farms, including villagers, which God rest my soul for dealing with them. The big meta to get money in the game was with Iron Golem farms, which I participated in. I also got 100,000 mob kills, particularly from blaze spawners, which allowed me to get 10 stars, which I don't even remember what that did, to be honest. I just remember it being a very cool milestone in the game. Once, I'd accidentally deleted an overpowered bow that I got from a Valentine's Day crate, which had all of the non-vanilla enchantments, but I got it back, which I remember made me really happy. Though at first, the admin accidentally gave me the wrong item. I guess when they fetched it with some plugin, they accidentally clicked the wrong quote-unquote Cupid's bow. Probably the craziest coincidence that's ever happened to me was the time where a new player joined the server. Their username was xblood_runnerx. My brother's old username was xblood_runnerx. It even had the same capitalization. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. I remember doing a fair amount of fishing, and I also built a roller coaster to ferry mobs with, since I tried to have a cage with all monsters. However, this plan would fail because when the server rebooted, sometimes the monsters would despawn. I also would occasionally hold events, though they were often pretty fruitless. Another thing that I found interesting was flying around the Skyblock server. Since everyone's Skyblock island was on the same server, you could just fly around and visit their islands. I wanted to map the server out to some extent, though I ended up just accidentally pissing them off, and sometimes they would become so paranoid that they would close their islands from any sort of visiting, which disallowed them from having a shop. I also discovered secret attempts to reach the top of the server leaderboards. Players like Wilbo would stash away a bunch of diamond, gold, and emerald blocks on alt accounts to secretly win prizes. Perhaps the most memorable thing I did on Manacube was create Panda Town. Essentially, I made this town themed around pandas. I know, the name is very esoteric. It included a mountain with a terraformed plain below. There were a few shops. They sold sticks, pet rocks, and bamboo, all for reasonable prices, of course. There was also a farm owned by Old McPanda, who of course grew bamboo. It also included class dynamics because capitalist propaganda seeps into every part of our lives. So there was like a well-to-do area, a shanty town, and a big house, which was of course owned by the mayor. Somewhat unrealistic because there was only a fountain in between the house and the poor pandas. Other than that, there was a big city hall, and some statues, but yeah, that's about it. Unfortunately for me, World Edit got disabled, which meant that I had to delay the opening of Panda Town because I really needed World Edit to enclose the project. When I opened it, a friend said that the background wall looked awful and could use more detail. However, this was in a pretty harsh way. I was very proud of Panda Town, so I didn't take this criticism well. In retrospect, it wasn't a big deal, but despite that, I still cried, cause, you know. Anyways, I also built a big head wall. where I evaluated if certain people were important or not. The coolest people who I was friends with, and the most active server members, even got the distinction of being important. I know. Other than that, in the wall of death I had, where I wrote down all of my deaths in the game, that's about it for the major things I built in Season 7 of Skyblock. Most of the time spent was just talking in the server chat while doing something, usually getting XP while enchanting. Honestly, I don't quite know how I made friends, since I was way too immature to be online at that point. I got muted like 13 times. Though mostly they were just from using capitalized characters too much, I still had a lot of trouble acting normal. However, I only got banned once. Essentially, I told a staff member who was also a friend of mine to teleport to me. They would land on a pressure plate that caused a dispenser to apply a cursive binding pumpkin to their head. While preparing the trap, I accidentally tested it on myself too. However, after I executed it, much to my surprise, there wasn't a plugin to remove the pumpkin, so I got banned for a whopping 30 minutes. After the first season of survival that I played a little bit on another season, where I had an underground ice-themed tunnel bunker thing because I was in an ice spikes biome. I don't think I played it very much though. When the prison server reset, I played with a friend my brother and I had made. He had a clan called Dream. This was before Dream was famous, and I do remember at one point someone in the team with YouTube rank building something, so I like to think that that was the real Dream. Anyways, it fell apart for me quickly, since I was still way too immature to actually be a good teammate. I think the breaking point came when I started spamming subscribe to PewDiePie in the Discord chat. Since then, I've sworn off guilds. I really became a lone wolf, a sigma male, you may say. I also participated in many server events. One comes to mind, where you had to carve ice. I carved a cool geometric shape. The top 3 winners would get a cool tag that went in front of their name, which I wanted. In retrospect, I had no business winning. I think the top 3 were better than me, but it was really sad because I came in 4th place by 1 vote. I was 1 vote away from tying 3rd and getting the title. Oof. Lastly, the final part of Manacube from this era that I should mention is creative. It was just a server where you built. I first did a small terraforming project, which honestly, for a first attempt, I think went pretty well. Then, I made this awesome build that was also terraformed. It had fire, earth, and ice. It was floating in the sky for the most part, as you can see. At the bottom, there were islands that weren't floating, with homes and towers, and even a crashed ship. When I asked a staff member, the same one I trolled earlier, if it would get a good grade, since you could submit your builds, she said it was bordering on a C. She suggested that I add a ship or something else to fill the space, so that I could ensure that I got a good grade on it. So I built a UFO dropping a nuke. Didn't fit the vibe, but hey, I got the grade I was looking for. I also built a cool little space scene, and accidentally created France. After a while, Skyblock had reset again into Season 8. I played a bit and wanted to make a giant griffin statue. I started to build a schematic in creative, but school was starting again and I had other projects that I was working on, and ultimately I just didn't have time to play Manacube. My brother also had left a bit before. He made up a dumb lie for attention, which caused a lot of people to be concerned for him. To save face, I had to participate in it, but it was pretty bad, and eventually it became too much and he left. All those factors compounded, and I eventually quit Manacube. The era was over. My first foray into the online world had concluded. My joy of Minecraft hadn't perished, though. Soon after, I began a survival Minecraft world. This one was different though, since it was on the computer and also in an updated version of the game, 1.14. At first, I wanted to have a survival let's play that I would upload to YouTube. So what I did was I searched Google for a really good seed. I exclaimed about the crazy shipwreck and buried treasure right next to spawn. And then after that I started building a house. And after 50 minutes I had footage for my first episode. And then I realized that I wasn't about to listen to myself for 50 minutes. So I quickly gave up on that and started a real survival world. I spawned in a spruce forest, and within literally 30 seconds, I saw foxes. Oh my god, look at them, aren't they so cute? So, literally the first thing I did was craft a bed and a boat. I created a tunnel thing to guide them through the dirt, and I made them make babies, since that's the only way to get domesticated foxes. Then, I released the parents into the wild. I named my foxes Spoot and Fard. I built a house for myself and a cute little storage system. So then I mined, which allowed me to build a really nice enchanting room. Once I had decent gear, I decided to enter the Nether, which I used to quickly travel to the local village. Then I defeated a raid, which commenced the painful process of enslaving villagers. Now, as you will probably know, the worst part about slavery is how annoying it is for me, their rightful owner, to ferry them across the Nether. I had to use pistons and everything, and even then, sometimes they would even suffocate and die in the Nether. But yeah, I eventually established a trading center, and with an automatic sugar farm, I became filthy rich. A few iron golems spawned as well. Just a couple. I also established an auto fisher, which was kind of overpowered, but we don't really talk about that much. I built a turtle sanctuary after getting tired of zombies stepping on the children, and then built some random farms because they looked nice, while simultaneously having animal farms that did not look nice. Team Trees had taken the internet by storm at that time, so I made sure to help by donating $0 but revitalizing the forests I had damaged in my construction. I also constructed a big obsidian box right next to the deserted village I had plundered to kill the Wither in, which I did a couple times. By that point I had a dog and a horse, as well as several cats, which kindly gave me phantom membranes. Then I decided that I wanted one of every breed of cat. So instead of dealing with having to breed all of them, I decided to sacrifice emeralds and diamonds to the gods due to not only my use of spawn eggs, but the removal of non-unique cats. I built a skyscraper for them, which honestly didn't really fit the vibe, but whatever. And a monument to the fallen soldiers. There wasn't much more to the world after that because I had felt content. I'd been watching a lot of YouTube, and although it wasn't entirely Minecraft, I did watch quite a bit of Minecraft. It was late 2019, so of course I was following PewDiePie's Minecraft series. I'd also been watching a little bit of Skeppy, though it was pretty on and off, and although I started watching in 2018, I didn't watch that much of him. However, what's more important to my story was Technoblade. I remember sitting at summer camp during lunch, late July of 2019. I watched his Hypixel vs Technoblade video. Although I'd only watched a few of those videos, about a month or two later, YouTube would recommend me more of his videos, especially after I'd watched a lot of the disgraced member of the SBI. I got absolutely hooked on Technoblade. I watched all of his streams live and watched his entire channel. He became my favorite YouTuber, and I even adopted some of his mannerisms. Because of him, I started playing a lot of Skywars. We'll get into my thousands of hours on Hypixel soon, but first I should also mention another fun connection. I began watching this small YouTuber, who had only about 100,000 subscribers at the time. His name was Dream. He had made this video about parkour. I really hadn't done anything parkour related since I quit Manacube. However, his video used Manacube a lot for the gameplay, since apparently Dream also had played the server. I was blasted with a massive wave of nostalgia from 3 months prior. I had literally no concept of time apparently. I began playing parkour again, however, my re-entry would be slow. And because of that, by the time I had actually started really playing again, the community had completely changed, so I had stopped being involved in chat. When I left, I was about 250 hours in. Early on, there was this bug where if you clicked a certain map in the map selector, it would send you to the wrong map. So I accidentally completed a map twice. When I had fully returned, which was in about summer of 2020, I decided to complete the most memorable maps multiple times to make it so that my total completions was a nice number above my unique completions, instead of literally just +1. So I completed 6 easy maps 9 times. The last run of each would be done in a timed mode. Unfortunately, those times are lost to history because the server was kind of forced to reset, but I'll get back to that later. I completed a medium difficulty map 6 extra times, and the hard map that I'd left unfinished when I quit 4 times. Then I did 2 expert difficulty maps twice, and an insane map 1 extra time. Though that one was just the most played map, since I literally hadn't done an insane difficulty map before. I finally had finished that project in the early fall of 2020, but I would only start parkouring on a lot of new maps again in November. Okay, so let's get back to December of 2019. I had noticed that a lot of Technoblade's recent videos were about Skyblock, except not Manacube Skyblock, but Hypixel Skyblock. I hadn't watched them yet. I worried that it would be too much to handle for me, and that the nostalgia and memories would be too strong. Again, I had stopped playing Manacube literally 4 months prior. This takes that Lenin quote to a whole nother level. But ultimately, I remember being in a Skywars game, and as my curiosity and boredom overpowered my anxiety, I clicked the Create Profile button. And man, was Skyblock different on Hypixel. The first thing that I did was complete several of the quests around the hub. Once done with that, I went mining. Eventually, I would reach the bottom of the deep caverns, where I'd run around mining obsidian and diamond blocks to get coins. I died quite a bit, but with my new armor and sword that I bought, I was able to survive somewhat. Eventually, I did kill enough of them to get a full set of their own armor. The next task I embarked on was fishing. I quickly realized that the clay pond I was fishing in wasn't very good, because surprisingly, you would often fish up clay. So I moved somewhere else. Then, after saving enough money, I embarked on a journey to do foraging with a jungle axe I'd bought. Now, keep in mind, I do have ADHD, and Skyblock is not exactly a fast-paced game. Therefore, I would be listening to Ask Reddit videos and later watching general YouTube to keep myself from getting bored. Around Christmas time, I decided to finally get rights, or a rank. I got the MVP rank and also got one for my brother. Now, the MVP rank is actually the worst rank to get since it's literally just VIP plus, except more expensive. Regardless, I had human rights. After doing some combat stuff where I got my Raider's Axe, I built out my island and upgraded some minions. Simultaneously, I was trying to get all the talismans, and to do that, I needed to get the Romero quest done. There was a problem though. It was for players much later on in the game and I was not equipped for it. I was far outside my limits and had to stop multiple times. That particular quest took me quite a while. I still have fond memories of spending a dozen hours mining 50,000 emeralds by hand, since I didn't have the money for a bunch of emerald minions. One of the quests required having a lot of mana, so when I finally got the armor set needed for it, I had a lot of fun teleporting around. During this time, I have a few memories of being scammed. Fortunately, none of them were a massive deal, and the only one that really hurt me was one where a kind stranger just gave me the 60,000 coins that I had been scammed out of, which also happened to be my entire bank balance at the time. This was for an enchanted mushroom block for Romero, of course. I also remember getting craft scam once. Essentially, I needed to enchant my bow, except I didn't have the recipe for one of the books unlocked. I asked around and eventually found someone willing to craft the book for me. However, instead of crafting the book, they just took the items and threw them away, which was really funny because they were worth literally nothing at the time, and all they wanted to do was inconvenience me, which I found really funny. At this point, I had started watching the YouTuber 30virus, so could rely on some advice other than just my brain, the fledgling forums, and the wiki. Oh, and speaking about 30, I watched him for a while, but after over a year of watching him every day, I started to get bored of his content, so I stopped watching, which made me pretty sad. Despite consuming a lot of Skyblock content, I didn't exactly have a preponderance of information in my early Skyblock days. Though, because of 30virus, I was inspired to build a pumpkin farm. Unbeknownst to me, I'd built it wrong, which got me very close to quitting because I felt really sad that to that point, my journey had been done incredibly inefficiently, especially since I had spent a lot of time just grapple hooking around the hub and not really doing anything or having any direction. I created a new profile, but I deleted it within a few hours. I persevered through my old one. Eventually, I got ambitious, and scrounging through the wiki, I saw an armor set that I could really use. I wanted to progress, so I needed a good armor to do that. Problem was, good armor was expensive. What I did was I got my trusty Raider's Axe out, filled my inventory with pearls, and began grinding Endermen. This took me many hours and weeks of work, but eventually I'd scrounged up enough money from killing Endermen to obtain not only the unstable dragon armor, the third best dragon armor, but also the best bow in the game, the Runan's bow. Getting the unstable dragon armor was absolutely my Skyblock peak, at least for the time. But then, a week later, I was banned from Hypixel. So, to explain what happened, I had been playing Skyblock and Skywars quite frequently at that time. I also used two different clients. I would use Forge Skyblock add-ons when playing Skyblock, and just Optifine when playing Skywars. One fateful day in mid-February, I was too lazy to change the client I was playing on. This meant that I would be playing Skywars with Skyblock mods activated. I figured they wouldn't change anything since I was playing on a totally different game. But apparently, something went awry. I was playing on Skychurch, and I bridged over to the middle, and got a nice combo on some guy, hitting them into the void. I then purled to the island next to me in an attempt to strength chain. Unfortunately, I got stuck in a block, and I couldn't get out. The person there started critting me out. Then I saw the classic watchdog message you constantly see: a player has been removed from your game for cheating. Then, to my surprise, the ban screen popped up. I was shocked. I literally had never logged onto Hypixel with a hacked client. I had only hacked once ever on a random faction server with my brother, and that only lasted about 20 minutes before promptly uninstalling the client because I got bored. I had never hacked on any server that I cared about, much less a competitive server. Yet, I'd been banned. I'd watched a few videos from a YouTuber called Zelk the Elk, who was in charge of ban appeals on Skeppy's server, where he often reviewed really dumb ban appeals. He always said to wait a bit before appealing because he grew tired of reading emotional 7-year-olds with horrendous grammar. After a few hours, I'd calmed down. I was pretty confident that I'd be accepted, since I wasn't cheating. I had to leave the house, but when I returned an hour and a half later, I ran to my computer and checked the appeal. I'd actually already received a response. They had automatically denied me. I was heartbroken. During the month that I was banned for, most of the Minecraft I did was on a server called Mineman Club. I played it because it was a PvP server, and I wanted to get better at PvP before coming back. And I do think that I got better. Other than that, it was mostly just watching YouTube. It was around this time where I began attempts to beat Minecraft in hardcore mode. I believe this took a few months with on and off play. However, I can't be sure because somehow there are no records of this. Apparently, I was really bad at survival Minecraft. It would take me 18 attempts. Most of the deaths were a result of 3 things. Firstly, creepers. Once I was in a mineshaft intersection. I was fighting off skeletons and spiders, and it just came up behind me and boom, I was dead. Another time, I was in a ravine, and a creeper just literally fell on me. Maybe it was karma for that time that Skywars random kit gave me Grenadier, which I used to drop charged creepers on a guy that just got 5 kills, winning me the game. Secondly, blazes. They do a crap ton of damage in hard mode, even if you're in full iron armor. After a couple deaths, I decided to try to take it more slowly. And third, lava. Once my water bucket bugged, another time I accidentally trapped myself under obsidian instead of saving myself, and a few more times I died because I wasn't used to lava being more than 1 block deep. I also would get hit into or fall in lava before getting armor, which would kill me quickly. On my 7th attempt, something absolutely crazy happened. I crafted a bed and placed it against a mountain, despite my subtitles having literally nothing on them. Apparently, there was lava behind the wall, and I somehow spawned in it. On my 16th attempt, I was in the end for the first time. There was a crowd of endermen I'd pissed off, so I placed water to protect myself. At that moment, the dragon fireballed my water, so I was completely cooked. On the 17th attempt, I brought 2 water buckets. I did the same thing with the enderman, except due to a nearby ledge, the water didn't work. I also had 2 block high ceilings, however, I was far away from them at that point. While I was fiddling with my water, the dragon slapped me and I went flying. Unfortunately, it was a mostly horizontal hit, and I did not have enough skill at the time to line up my water bucket while in a bumpy area. I died. On my 18th attempt, I immediately found a pink sheep. I guess it blessed me, because not only did I get my diamonds relatively quickly, but I would also win on that attempt. I got enchanted diamond armor, got blaze rods, spent 30 minutes gathering sticks to sell to villagers, and traded them for ender pearls. the end fight went smoothly and I landed a few water buckets. And then I won. Yippee! By mid-March, I was unbanned just in time for the pandemic. I'd been watching a lot of Tapple every day for the past several months, and since I was starting to get good at PvP, I would join a few of the UHC events that he held, though I never got that far. In April, I watched Dream livestream some survival world. After like 20 minutes of technical issues, I got bored and stopped watching. You might know the survival world as the Dream SMP. I had been loosely following it since Tommy and It had joined, since I had been subbed to him since his 169,000 subscriber milestone. But I really began to pay attention when Technoblade joined. Fun story, one of the big streams was on January 6th, 2021. My parents had the TV on for some reason, which wasn't common. There was just some protest at Washington. After it had finished, I went to see what the big hubbub was about, only to see replays of people literally scaling the walls of the Capitol building. In May of 2020, I met the guy who would become my best online friend and my closest confidant. I was complaining in chat about being broke. He told me to just bizarre flip. I was familiar with the basics of flipping items, but I didn't really want to do it. Though he told me that enchanted redstone blocks were pretty good to do. I did that for a little while, but didn't make too much money. But I did make a friend. For the sake of the video, we'll call him Duck. We talked for an hour or two, and the next day we exchanged Discord so that we could communicate while playing Bedwars. After we had each other's Discords, we would begin talking frequently. Just after this, I decided to remodel my skin. I took a panda that I had found on the internet and made it significantly better. When making it, at one point I forgot to save, causing me to lose the exact hex code for the perfect shade of cream white that I needed on the rim of the belly. However, about 2 years after, when tweaking the skin, I got roughly the same thing. In June, the Nether update came out, and my brother and I played on a survival world with it. It didn't last long, but we still had a lot of fun doing all the new stuff and getting netherite gear. In July, Hypixel finally released the long-awaited Dungeons update. Duck had prepared to be a tank, while I was to be an archer. We did the entry floor together alone, even though it was recommended to have 5 players. After that, we found a party and began playing. 2 days after the update dropped, I decided to splurge. I spent 6 million coins, which was a lot back then, on the new ultimate enchantment, which is garbage now. But instead of putting it on my weapon, the aspect of the dragons, I accidentally put it on my aspect of the end. Whoops. Since there was another ultimate enchantment that was really good for my AOTE, I ended up just buying a new one and putting the old one on display. Early dungeons wouldn't last long for me though. I only played the first 3 floors a little bit until I got bored. However, in December, I would play 1 round of floor 4 to get completion, and on my first run I got the rare drop worth a lot of money, which was pretty funny. I also tuned in to the Skyblock YouTuber Hellcastle's first livestream. At the end of the stream, after friending everyone in the chat, he got in a call with Technoblade, who was playing Bridge at the time. And I was able to ask Techno questions indirectly by asking Hellcastle to ask Techno things, like when the next video was, or what he was doing in Skyblock, or how the potato war was going. I only sent like 2 or 3 and Techno didn't really give long responses, but it was still quite the memory. Looking back, this was absolutely hilarious. Not only was I being incredibly disrespectful to Hellcastle, who was already seeming to be nervous in Techno's presence, being a fan as well, but I was also displaying massive hypocrisy. So in Manacube parkour, despite liking Dream myself, many Dream stans would be constantly yapping in the server chat, because Dream had shown Manacube in one of his videos as previously mentioned. I was fighting on the front lines against stan culture, yet here I was, absolutely fanboying over Technoblade. Fortunately, I wasn't as obsessive as most Minecraft stans, because I recognized that we did not know each other and were internet strangers, and also understood to not completely deify him. You could say that I was a little starstruck. Anywho, in late July, Hypixel announced that they would be hosting a tournament. In tournaments, if you do well, you can get a lot of tributes, which you could use for useful perks and good cosmetics in other games. The tournament was for
Turbo Kart Racers!
Basically Mario Kart in Minecraft. I practiced it for a week beforehand, getting dozens of hours. I really got the hang of it, and got a maxed cart just in case they didn't give you a maxed cart for the tournament. My goal was to get top 500, which had a good deal of awards within that bracket. After the tournament had ended, I got 510th. Now, of course, this wasn't my fault, it was entirely RNG. In summer, I got MVP Plus rank, the highest rank that wasn't subscription based. I also began the routine of playing Skywars often. I'd warm up for 20 or so minutes on duels, and then play Skywars for usually 2 hours or so until I got 500 experience. I also uploaded my first block clutch montage, just 2 months after getting my first ever block clutch. I became quite skilled with ender pearls, however it'd be a while before I got good at block extensions, which are when you get knocked off the map, but by placing several blocks on each other, you can survive. For Halloween, there was a spooky quest that you could get a lot of rewards from if you completed it. For the most part, it was easy. However, you had to get 3 wins in Mega Mode, which was extremely difficult due to hackers and sweaty teams. It probably took me 15 to 25 hours. But damn, when I finally got it, it was euphoria. Meanwhile, in the fall, Skyblock had another big update, the Mayor update. It had a lot of new content, though it was pretty spread out. One mayor called Derpy would double gained skill experience, so I had to scramble and build a massive sugarcane farm. I had already started to build more sugarcane farms, but I had kind of put it off. But because of Derpy and the fact that there was no way I could afford all the sugarcane I needed for Alchemy 50 without getting it myself, I had to scramble. My hand literally took 2 days to recover because of how much I had to click. Nevertheless, I succeeded and began farming. In just that week, I leveled my rabbit pet all the way up. After acquiring all the sugarcane I needed, I spent the hour or 2 to get Alchemy 50, and then I had my first maxed skill. Around that time, the social skill was added, and although it was completely useless, it meant that all of the YouTubers opened up their islands. I decided to AFK on Technoblade's island for the memes, hoping he'd come online and that I could get a screenshot. That was to no avail. However, just before I went to sleep, I realized that I forgot to take melatonin, and went to get it. While there, I decided to check and see if Techno had made an appearance. He had immediately gone AFK, which allowed me and another guy to organize everyone into a single file line so that everyone could get a screenshot. During winter break, I played a lot of minigames. I enjoyed TNT Tag because the nerves never got old to me, especially when you were running away and they blew up right before getting to you. And there was this Grinch Simulator tournament that I participated in. I actually did okay, but I didn't do as good as I did in the Turbo Kart Racers one. I also played a bit of Murder Mystery and got good at party games. Lastly, I got Enchanting 60 in Skyblock, which took literally no time at all because it was a terribly designed skill. Now it was 2021. I was making strides in PvP, and finally felt like I was halfway decent. In fact, I'd faced Time Dio in a duel, which I won. I even got a win streak of 90. This guy named E with like 15 R's after it once got mad after I killed him, saying that I cleaned him when I didn't. He kept calling me a bitch dog, even though I asked him to settle it in a game of Tetris. Instead, he challenged me to Skywars duels, which I'd never done before. I won 2 out of 3 games. In fact, 95% of the time when people challenged me to duels after a game, I'd win. I'd also gotten a better mouse, which in retrospect was probably not optimal for me because it was better for butterfly clicking when I preferred jitter clicking. Regardless, Skywars was going pretty well. At first, I'd been using the Enderman kit, but when it got nerfed badly, I switched to the Scout kit, which gave me infinite speed basically. In December, I switched to Knight kit, which apparently I liked quite a lot. I'd passed many milestones, and at that point I'd uploaded my first and only funny moments video, as well as my first 4 montages. I learned to bridge better, as well as jitter bridging, At the beginning of 2021, I'd just gotten a new computer, which I used when making my 5th montage, now featuring effects and shaders, uploaded that February. I accidentally advertised on a specular montage and got a few views from that. Also, the same day the montage was uploaded, I installed Lunar Client. I made myself a texture pack with minor adjustments like low fire, clear GUI, and having hardcore hearts. Now, I did this because when I got Lunar Client, the low fire that they added was ugly. Although I was really good with ender pearls and saving myself on walls, I still wasn't very good at surviving by extensions. So, I went on a server with Duck, and we had several sessions playing bridge and practicing together. I definitely got better. Another thing I did was play on a shattered world, where I'd not only pearl around, but also bridge and move around quickly, whilst listening to TED Talks that I found interesting. Another way I improved was playing on the server anti-AC, where I would often intentionally look away and then have to quickly look back when the NPC hit me in order to practice for Skywars situations. During this time, I also learned to drag click, where I got up to 31 clicks in 1 second on a mouse not well suited for it. I played for quite a bit on Bedwars Practice Club, which was another server. I did a lot of their technique challenges. I'll get back to that later. I also played their block sumo game a lot in May, which I did quite well in. By the end of the improvement arc, which was in spring, I had further improved the frequency at which I was getting clutches, and with the higher production quality of my editing, my montages uploads were determined by how long it took me to edit them instead of how long to get clips. Likewise, before the summer, I now had 7 montages under my belt. Also, on March 20th, things lined up where I maxed the shop, got an opal, which takes a while to get, hit Prestige 16, and 20,000 kills in one few-hour session. In April, I killed the person that got the first Hypixel level 1000, so just a dude that's really rich. And this was during the time he was level 1000. In February, there was this fun little test that I was a part of. I think it was just testing the limits of the new server capacities. I ran around with my seed, which I got, while of course getting a bunch of screenshots with the admins. I wanted to make a video on it, somewhat inspired by Technoblade's Skyblock experience. I rushed it out, and of course made sure to watch the landing of the Perseverance rover, and then uploaded it. I wanted to make sure that I was the first. It got a whopping 5 views. I watched it back a few months later and I was embarrassed, so I privated it. I also was doing a lot in Skyblock. I finally finished the Romero questline. Around that time, I also crafted a ton of minions and began mining. Mining had finally received an update, so I played in the new Dwarven mines. This was pretty slow, but I was still making good pace while watching YouTube. Oh, and I also bought this maxed fishing rod. By March, I had mining 50, which is like halfway to 60. While doing so, I also participated in the Dwarven Mines event raffles, for basically no rewards, though I did get quite lucky at some points. I passed some more milestones until April happened, and it was time for Dante. He was this evil dictator that a bunch of dummies had voted into power, and, surprisingly, he didn't let go of it. So, the admins staged a resistance. However, to crack down on us, he cruelly outlawed many important things. Duck and I were in a call, watching Techno stream, complaining about the evils of Dante. Then, the uprising began, and to our shock and horror, a giant slime grew. Yet, we fought it valiantly. Eventually, it was killed without any commands. Nobody just typed /kill Dante. With the skill experience buffs, I would do more mining, all while enjoying the rewards of the new YouTuber mayors. Later, in May, the grind furthered, and I got all the way up to mining 59, just one away from completing mining. Then, soon after in June, I got mining 60 in the coolest and most radical way possible. After completing mining, I decided to grind farming again. Most of it was sugarcane, however I wanted to maximize farming fortune while doing it, so I decided to also build out the rest of the farms in order to win Jacob's contests. I would often go on walks and then come back to grind cocoa beans for 2 hours. In just a couple weeks, I'd built the rest of the layers out. Luckily, I didn't have to break any part of my island. Had my farms been 1 block taller, I would have had to do that. Back to the grind, I'd fly past milestones, and in early July I got farming 50. Just a few days later, farming 51. Eventually, I decided to do some bestiary, which was just killing mobs for each mob kill milestone, getting rewards. I got combat 30, finally. Funnily enough, the most important skill in the game was my second lowest, only beaten by foraging, which I'd stopped doing after getting to level 25. Despite the crystal hollows being released and destroying the economy, which pissed me off since it would have made getting mining 60 so much more profitable, I was still mostly farming. With the money that I got from it, I bought Shadow Assassin armor and a Livid Dagger. Also, my clay minions, which I'd been using for basically the entire time I'd been playing Skyblock, because they're decent for money and aren't subject to market dynamics, had been producing quite a lot. I was up to nearly 150 million clay collection before August, and number 150 in the entire world. I'd speed past many and dropped 40 spots in just one day. Despite school starting, farming continued into August. I also was able to max fishing collections by just having 1 fishing minion down and letting it go for a few weeks. I'd continue to farm, but at a lower rate while school was picking up, though my clay minions were in overdrive getting me fishing experience. Before farming 57, I had reached 100 million collected sugarcane. I had a lot of the Skyblock achievements, but I wanted more, so in the winter I spent time trying to get the one where you just drop a ring into lava within a rare room in the Crystal Hollows. This would not come, and I would give up. During winter break, I would farm a lot and finally got farming 60, which I got in a way where I could clickbait people into thinking that I used real money to get it. Essentially, you had to buy farming level cap upgrades with in-game items. So, I bought cookies with real money, which I sold to get money for the items. Anyways, yeah, that was quite the milestone. I wanted to buy all the farming upgrades in one shot, however, I couldn't because when the update first came out, I bought a couple. Oh, and I also had maxed the farming fortune boost, which not many players had done. Meanwhile, I'd been playing Parkour, and not only had I reached 1,000 unique map completions on Manacube, but I was also playing on a server made by some YouTubers. Anyways, it was also Parkour, and I spent a few dozen hours getting pretty good times on all of the easy and medium maps, and then some of the hard maps. I stopped not too long after that. I also think I played Housing Parkour, but I don't have any screenshots from that. In March, I made a tier list of Hypixel games, and made a lot of people mad because they couldn't understand sarcasm when I said it was objective. That post still has my reaction score tanked. I also went on a mission to get all the murder mystery achievements, which proved successful, though I did annoy a few people with my excessive posting. I was still improving at PvP and block clutching. In fact, on the Bedwars Practice Club server I played, I grinded the techniques a ton in fall, and even became the best in the entire world at one of them, getting the weekly record for high block clutch for like 2 months straight, and even came back to them in 2022, but I wasn't too active and it didn't really persist. And after I stopped playing the techniques on the server, I basically stopped putting time into it. Meanwhile, in late 2021, the improvement arc was still paying off. I was consistently getting better and better. I was playing a ton, and reached many milestones during this time. I had many high kill games, several of which reached 9 out of 11 total players. At one point I also almost got 75 XP in one game, even though most games get like 16, or in the case where it's a corrupted game, which this was, I usually get like 30 or so. I would play for roughly 2 hours until I got 500 XP, and this was basically every day. Though if I was on the edge of something, there were a few sessions upwards of 4 to 5 hours. I was very good, and won most games. This posed a problem though. To get cool block clutches, I had to get into perilous situations, which was a problem, because that was exceedingly rare because I was good at the game. So, what I would do if I didn't have enough cool clips for my montage would be that I would spend a few hours putting myself in intentionally risky situations. I was still trying to win, and often would, though I wasn't playing very intelligently. Regardless, these strategies worked, and I got good clips. By the end of 2021, I was Prestige 19, which was relatively high, and I'd killed Mine Pro West 3 times, which I found funny because he was one of the top Skywars YouTubers. I had quite a bit of fun in Skywars, with many fun moments, even despite the fact that it was at times rage-inducing, especially given how stupid the players were when they were constantly kamikazeing or cleaning your fight. In December of 2021, there was this holiday achievement for Murder Mystery, and since it was Murder Mystery related, I felt I had to get it. Problem was, it was completely fucking broken. It took me fulfilling the requirement to get it like 9 times. Oh, and did I say requirements? I meant the requirements that were not in the description, but were the real requirements. It looked simple. All you had to do was win as murderer after clicking 3 presents. The presents were scattered throughout the map, randomly spawning on specific locations. However, the present rewards were also scrambled for some reason, and they were scrambled separately from the presents. Most people assumed that you just needed 3 presents where the color of the present matched the rarity of the reward, since within the rarities, the rewards were the same. But no, each present actually had a unique identity. This shouldn't have been a problem, because regardless, you still opened a present. What caused the problem was the admins had fucked up the coding that checked if you'd opened a certain present. The check wouldn't work if the present you clicked gave a reward that didn't match the corresponding present. So, for it to count, you had to hope that the reward given corresponded to the present you'd clicked on 3 times in one game. I had rounds where I'd get 7 that matched the rarity and it still didn't count. Mind you, it takes like 30 minutes to have a game where you're murderer, and you had to win as murderer. So since you had no idea if you had done it or not, you just had to get as many as you could and hope it worked. So I would spend like 40 minutes waiting to be murderer since I was unlucky, and then half the time I wouldn't fulfill the requirements, and then the other half I would and still not get the achievement. I had no idea it was more complex than the colors matching. So I was just modding for like 15 hours. It was several days of just torture. It was awful. But when I got it, +5 achievement points. Let's go. In the spring of 2022, I'd play a fair amount of minigames, particularly TNT Run and Farm Hunt. Compared to Skywars and Skyblock, they weren't particularly significant. After finally getting Farming 60 in January, I took a break from Skyblock, but I started to play again in the spring. Now I was set on getting Slayers to level 9. First, I quickly got to Zombie Slayer level 7, which didn't take too long because I was already pretty close. Then I got Spider level 6 and Wolf level 7. All of this was in just a few days. Then I got some gear and tried to do the boss level 5 for the zombies because it was more efficient and had better loot. However, it was much more difficult and hands-on than tier 4. I began to master it slowly and would eventually be able to kill it quickly. This process also leveled my combat, which was previously very underdeveloped. After just a couple days, I got Zombie Slayer to level 8. After that, I switched to Wolves, which were the slowest of the Slayers and the most annoying. Despite that, after a couple days of grinding, I had already reached level 8, beating Duck, who said that he'd get Wolf 8 first. By the way, I denied a skill average race prior, so it was pretty funny that he even challenged me to something that I was actively working towards, because I wouldn't have accepted another challenge that I wasn't already doing. Regardless, I went back to Zombie Slayer and I quickly beat it. Then, I moved on to Spiders. They were very fast, and I blazed through not only combat, but also the Slayer leveling. I got level 8 of 9 the next day, but I had to keep it varied, so I would usually go back and forth between Spiders and Wolves. Just a few weeks after Zombie was maxed, I had Spider at level 9. Then, on May 5th, I completed the Slayer journey. I finally got Wolves to level 9. It was atrocious to do, but I had done it. Now, let's talk about loot. For zombies, my luck was pretty average, but the other two, my luck was absolutely insane. For Spiders, I dropped 11 Tarantula Talismans and 6 Fly Swatters in the 1,850 T4s that I did. Not to mention the fact that I got a talisman on the 3rd Slayer on which it was possible, which alone is a 1% chance. The binomial probability of 17 items in the frame that I did is 0.03%, So if you were to line up 10,000 players, only 2 of them on average would have had better spider luck than me. Getting so lucky is great, except for the fact that Spider was the least profitable Slayer. Luck like that on any other Slayer would have made me millions and millions of coins, but getting that on Spiders was almost worthless. I made very little money. Now let's look at Wolves. I dropped my Overflux, which was the best item I could have conceivably dropped, at 822,000 experience. That's 1,444 bosses after it became possible. Most players consider it bad luck to have not gotten one after half of that experience. Getting it at 822,000 is atrociously bad. So yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? What made it even more frustrating was the RNGesus meter, which gave you an RNG drop of your choice if you beat enough bosses without getting anything. Problem was, it would reset after any rare drop, so I kept getting a rare rune, which was completely useless, and it was rare enough to reset the meter, which was extremely frustrating. In the middle of my Slayer grinding, the Crimson Isle update was released. It didn't sidetrack me too much, however I would start trophy fishing, and got my first diamond on May 8th. That was very cool. Unfortunately for me, I didn't really have the tools to defeat Kudra, the major draw to the update, so the faction quest would remain uncompleted for a long time. I still played the Crimson Isle update, mostly doing trophy fishing as previously mentioned. However, I also got a lot of faction reputation and enjoyed the rescue missions, even though at times they required variable bugs to pull off. There were also dojo minigames, which were very fun, but also extremely annoying. But back to trophy fishing. It's composed of 18 fish, each with levels of bronze, silver, gold, and diamond. Each level is progressively rarer, and each fish needs different conditions to get it. 9 days after the update, I had caught at least one of each trophy fish. The next day, I began going for all gold trophy fish, because diamond would take too long. I quickly got 2 on the same day. After that I slowed down, but got my next difficult one on the 10th. After that, I had only 2 more fish to do, karate fish and volcanic stonefish. Karate fish was the hardest, because not only did I have bad luck with getting the right level of it, it was also the rarest trophy fish, with only a 1% chance of fishing it up. It took me like 20 to 30 hours to get it. 2 days later, I got a volcanic stonefish, the final one I needed. Except, actually I didn't. In fact, I got a diamond stonefish before a gold stonefish. This was also on top of the fact that I was in a lobby with Palika and Refraction, who are my favorite Skyblock YouTubers. I got screenies and had a lot of fun in that lobby, talking with them for a while. Though I did end up getting gold stonefish that session as well. My dungeon's journey began on May 14th. The plan was to play floor 6 until I was catacombs level 30, after which I'd play floor 7. Problem was, I started from level 12, since I hadn't played the update since it had released nearly 2 years prior. Duck would carry me through the beginning, and we played together a lot. Though, eventually I started solo queuing. By the way, I was always the Berserker class, since it required absolutely nothing and was for the most part useless except for making clears faster. When I reached Kata 24, which allowed me to play a floor 7 run, Duck made a party, and I joined it at the last second, so that I could get a completion without them noticing that I was completely inexperienced. What I did was I wore Duck's Necron armor to pretend that it wasn't my first run, even though it didn't give me any health because you needed to complete floor 7 once to use it. I just stayed back and did a couple secrets, and did almost nothing during the boss fight. I had finally gotten the completion I was waiting for. Duck let me borrow his Necron armor since he wasn't really using it, which gave me a huge upgrade. I was also using it for things other than dungeons, so I bought a Necron's helmet to use it with since Duck didn't have one because it was useless in dungeons. Eventually, a bit after I'd gotten my own, he rudely forced me to give back his Necron, even though it was now mine because I'd worn it. Regardless, after I got a summoning ring, I stopped off quickly to do Enderman Slayer level 4, which was the new Slayer boss, but then went back to the grind of dungeons. Pretty quickly, I'd already found 1,000 secrets, which were essential in clearing dungeon rooms. On May 29th, just 2 weeks after starting, I crafted a new weapon to accompany my Livid Dagger, the Axe of the Shredded. It deals a ton of damage to undead mobs. I only had to buy 2 of the expensive parts, since I'd already dropped half of the needed ones while doing Zombie Slayer. After just 5 weeks, on June 19th, I reached my goal of Catacombs 30 after hundreds of Floor 6 runs. In the summer, we started slowly doing Floor 7 runs together, and the times were even slower. I, also despite being by far the lowest dungeons level in every party, still often wasn't even the worst player. I got pretty good at crushing, which was the stage of the boss fight. On July 15th, Duck dropped the rare Implosion Scroll, which at the time went for 3 million coins, despite being almost as rare as something that went for 600 million. The next day, I reached the milestone of Combat 50. In August, I witnessed my first handle, which was the really good drop. It wasn't mine or Duck's, but still, someone in our party dropped the best item you could get. When school started back up, our dungeon sessions became much more spread out, only maybe once a month since we had conflicting schedules, which was worsened by the time zone difference. In October, while just goofing around the Mushroom Island, I noticed Chum. Apparently, Chum had been added a month before, so that night I just did the update. I also played in the End Revamp update, but it didn't take me very long. After doing that, I grinded Tier 2 Enderman Slayers to get up to Slayer level 5, which allowed me to use the Juju bow, which was a bow that was pretty easy to obtain, yet still very powerful. In November, I almost had an aneurysm doing the test of control in the dojo, which had finally been released. Basically, you have to keep your eyes on this stupid skeleton for like 2 minutes straight while it was jumping around. In theory, it doesn't sound too hard, especially if you have good ping like me. But in practice, it's absolutely impossible because the servers were just so laggy. But eventually, after several hours, I did beat it. After that, I wanted to have good equipment items, which had been added a while before, but I'd kind of neglected them. I noticed that an item called the Synthesizer V3 was pretty good. It ended up being fun to obtain, which I was forced to do because it was so expensive. I had plans to get more to sell, but I was kind of busy at the time, and ended up deciding against it. Now I wanted to focus on the Enderman Slayers, which I hadn't done previously because of how hard they were compared to the other 3. I spent a lot of money upgrading my katana, which was used against Enderman. Then I upgraded it again once I got Enderman to level 6. At that point, I could easily beat a tier 3 Enderman, which were pretty difficult. I also finally upgraded my Aspect of the End, and could now teleport much farther. Though, after getting level 6, I kind of stopped and began doing other things. Duck finally got a handle on December 5th, so that was quite the celebration. I wasn't there for that though. After that, I played the new Jerry Island revamp, which finally got me a purple dolphin, a reward for having fished 5,000 sea creatures. Then I finally started the Crystal Hollows, which I'd previously neglected because I was annoyed that it was released right after I finished mining. I bought a new mining set which replaced my old glassite armor, and I quickly got Heart of the Mountain 6, grinding commissions. Less than a week later, or like 5 hours of playing later, I got Heart of the Mountain 7. On that same day, I also finished my 25th Nucleus run, of which I'd been doing whilst getting my commissions done. This garnered me an achievement, which made the pain of doing metal detecting worth it. Oh, and the day after Christmas, while collecting my clay minions, I finally got Fishing 50, which at this point was after having collected over 330 million clay. 2022 was certainly a productive year for my Skyblock career. Yet, it was also a big year for me in other areas. But before we get into that, it was also the year which contained the saddest part of this journey. On August 27th in 2021, Technoblade announced he was diagnosed with cancer. Along the way, I thought everything would be fine. After all, Technoblade never dies. Given that it was in his shoulder, I googled what kind of cancer was in those places, and found that it was almost certainly a very non-lethal cancer. I breathed a sigh of relief and continued the techno support. When he opened his merch shop in the spring of 2022, I bought a hoodie. However, on June 30th, 2022, I was watching YouTube when my brother croaked down the stairs that, quote, Techno has died. I opened a new tab in YouTube, and the first thing on my feed was a video from Techno. I started watching it and the pit in my stomach grew. My favorite YouTuber, a role model I'd idolize and strive to be more like, was gone. I ended up writing in the book that Hypixel organized, and finally joined the Technoblade subreddit, which I'd occasionally comment and post on beforehand. There I talked with a lot of other people, including some back and forth with Techno's father. It certainly helped me grieve, but even though I rewatched his videos countless times when he was alive, I still haven't watched much Technoblade since. Back to Hypixel though, I played the new games that were coming out. I quickly got all the achievements in Wool Wars and played Dropper when it was released. In August, I began grinding party games because there was an achievement for getting 5,000 stars, or around 1,300 round wins. It all went pretty smoothly, since I was quite good, though it did take a while. While playing, I made friends with a guy named Monkey City 17. He was the only one who could match me in games, and for good reason. He was grinding to be number 1 on Lifetime Wins leaderboard. After a couple days, I got up to 2,500 stars, halfway there, though I still had a long way to go since I had started from 1,300. Also in August, I began hunting for a lot of other achievements. I played Galaxy Wars, Bounty Hunters, Hole in the Wall, Hide and Seek, and more. One of the first arcade games that I maxed was Ender Spleef. There was one game with only one achievement. It was Pixel Painters, and the achievement was just to get one win. Problem was, I was not very good. I kept losing, either to troll votes, to this random Indian girl who was absolutely cracked at the game, or just getting scammed by dumb voters. Once, I even got completely scammed because I lost to someone who I'd already beaten in the elimination rounds. It was extremely frustrating. I was like 20 hours deep for literally one achievement. At one point, my mom came to the room that had my computer in it to wish me good night, only to see me red and silently crying. I was reaching my breaking point. I complained to her that I always lose this stupid game and how annoying it was. However, by some miracle, the last game of the night that I would play, and the one that my mom watched me play, happened to be the one that I won. It's just like when you can't find something after 10 minutes of looking and then your parents find it immediately. Anyways, yeah, I'm never playing that game again. After a couple weeks of doing achievements, maxing out the hide and seek games, I went back to the party games grind. During this time, I met some really cool people, one of them exchanging discords with me. He's the kind of person where if you need something, he'll help you no matter what. He helped me get some achievements, but there was one Bounty Hunters achievement that we just couldn't get after a few hours of trying, which happened to be the last session that we did. Anyways, as for party games, after about a month, on September 30th, I had finally reached the 5,000 star mark. After that, I decided to work on some of the murder mystery tiered achievements, some of which take forever. I made some progress, but ultimately stopped because it was just too much. Though there was one game of doubles I played with Duck, and we were both murdered. That was a fun game. In winter, I got a lot of TNT Games achievements, particularly in Bow Spleef. Even though it was a terrible game, I had some fun hunting the achievements in Wizards, which is like Capture the Flag except horrible. I also played a lot of parkour in 2022. I started playing substantially in spring, and had finished all the levels except for the insane difficulty ones, which I began doing. I also finally reached the rank of Champion, which was the highest parkour rank, meaning I'd beaten a lot of levels, essentially. But soon after that, parkour would be reset. Fortunately, it wouldn't reset your completions, so I was safe. It also reset mana, which was used to rank up. The economy was completely cooked, and that was why they had to reset it. I didn't care too much about mana though, so it wasn't a big deal for me. However, my items, other than my Pegasus boots, which gave me speed if I needed them, were not spared. I had lost my gold armor, which I'd gotten years prior for having the MVP rank, on top of diamond armor, fishing rods, a spoon, meticulously dyed leather armor, and my bedrock hat. They were cosmetics, yes, but it still made me sad, so I opened up a ticket. And it only took 5 months for my items to be restored. The parkouring momentum continued into summer, but slowed when school started. However, it picked back up in October, and by the end of December, I was only 100 maps away. During the summer of 2022, I'd also started my very last survival world. It was just a small world on my phone, because I needed something to do while on the airplane or just traveling in general. I didn't do that much. I just built a house, gathered some stuff, had a villager trading center, which definitely didn't use spawn eggs, and I had a mob XP farm. But that was about it. Finally, to round off 2022, let's look at Skywars. In January, I hit 4,000 wins and 30,000 kills. And on March 20th, I hit Prestige 20. This was the biggest milestone in the game that I'd accomplished. Since maxing the shop in 2021, I spent most of my coins on the exorbitant Angel of Death upgrades. In April, I released my 13th montage, and in June, the grind continued, alongside the upload of my 14th montage, which was by far my most successful, gaining hundreds of views in a day. On July 7th, I hit Prestige 21. At this point, I had enough clips to make 4 videos. So, I decided to take a break from Skywars to work on the montages. Unbeknownst to me, this would be the last day I played Skywars seriously. Skywars had been increasingly stale, on top of the fact that other players were getting better and better, which meant that I had to try harder to win, which made it less fun. The nail in the coffin would come on August 9th. Skywars received an update, its first in 2 years. However, this update was garbage. Not only did it screw up the last update, which came in 2020, but it also destroyed perks. In Skywars, there are perks which you can upgrade. They aren't overpowered, but they make the game more bearable and more interesting to play. This update made them worthless because it forced you to pick like 6 of them, and on top of that, it broke several of them. It also rebalanced the perks, making some of them worthless. Not only did they completely fuck up the perks, but the kit balancing they did was also pretty bad. And they added an extraneous system that basically replaced perks anyways, but you had to spend a shit ton of opals for them, and they only lasted for a limited time. The whole point of revamping perks was to make it less play to win, yet these tonics did exactly the opposite. The one part I liked was how one thing became more important. Although they made the opal shop less ridiculous to max out because you no longer had to have like level 50 or something to get all of it, it was still ruined. This was because another thing, souls, which already had a use, were now used to purchase opals. But you still needed a ton of them, and you had to constantly ensure that they weren't overflowing because they forgot to change the cap of souls that you could have after completely rebalancing the game with the express intent of making them important. Although as you can see, a lot of people disagreed with my forum post ranting about it, the player count halved on update day. The last time Skywars updated, the player count had doubled on update day. So I think the player counts speak for themselves. Nowadays, Skywars takes like a minute to queue when it used to take like 12 seconds. And even when there are players now, they are all extremely sweaty. So I realized that these 4 montages would be my last. One was uploaded in October, and it had my favorite opening sequence I've ever made. At one point I accidentally deleted a lot of clips, and I had to go on a days-long recovery mission. The effort ended up successful, however, I learned a hard lesson on backups. I decided that the final 3 would be uploaded in quick succession in December because I wanted them to be completed before the new year. I worked on them a lot, and they became some of my most intensely edited montages. Then, on December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, I uploaded them. I had reached my deadline, and the era of Skywars had come to its conclusion. It was now 2023, and in this winter, I'd mostly focus on Skyblock. There were 2 major goals I had: my journey to Hyperion from dungeons, and to max out the heart of the mountain tree by getting 20 million gemstone powder and 12.5 million mithril powder, so I could be done with mining. During winter break, the dungeons grind restarted, but then of course when I went back to school, it slowed down. As for mining, I began by powder grinding, which I did quite a bit in January. I eventually stopped mid-February in favor of simply doing daily commissions, which gave a ton of powder for 0 effort. Then, literally 2 weeks after that, I also finally finished the conversation with the NPC that makes you click on it 5,204 times, with each line of dialogue having 5-second buffers. So I spent 3 hours doing literally nothing. Fun. Oh, and then 2 weeks after I'd done the 25 nucleus runs, Hypixel decided to give you a boatload of experience if you did 50 nucleus runs. Except it wasn't retroactive, so I had to do everything again, but twice. This pissed me off tremendously. However, the most frustrating part of this was getting scavenged items, which was the most annoying part of the quest. Along the way, I got a few insanely rare items, which were useless and easily obtainable elsewhere. Thank you, Hypixel, very cool. Towards the end of the previous semester at school, I'd learned that an IRL friend of mine played Skyblock 2 when he was just watching Refraction on a school computer, so we bonded over that. He mostly just mined and gave me a gemstone gauntlet for free, which was really nice of him. Just a few weeks after I got it, I accidentally auctioned it, so I just done a nucleus run. I got a gemstone mixture, which I then auctioned off. But I wasn't paying attention, so instead, I accidentally auctioned off my gemstone gauntlet. After trying to mine for a daily commission, only to hotkey to my hand, I realized my mistake. Unfortunately, despite my best efforts to talk to the buyer, it was just an auction scalping bot, so I was just cooked. Somehow eventually they responded, except they said that they gave it back for 20 mil, and then when I went to trade them, they went back to AFKing. The next day, my friend had the auctions pulled up. I also did, but wasn't paying attention at that time. However, my friend messaged me that the gauntlet was up. I bought it back, but had to put new gemstones in it as they'd been removed. I then soulbinded it immediately. After that, I went back to prepping for nucleus runs. While doing that, right after I had finished a nucleus run, a guy in my lobby got a 1 billion coin super rare drop, and he hadn't even done very many nucleus runs. After that, I decided to finally lock in on the harp. The harp is one of the stupidest things in all of Skyblock. Basically, you have to click the blocks when they come down, except like the test of control, even if you have good ping, it's still super difficult because the server will just lag, and it'll all come crashing down at once, and you would be completely screwed. I only really had to do the last song, which was like 3 minutes long. So you'd have to just hope and pray that not only would you not fuck it up after 3 minutes of playing, but the server also wouldn't fuck you up after 3 minutes of playing. Finally, I did it, after only 30 minutes of grinding. I'd tried it on occasion for similar sessions, and probably had like a cumulative 5 or so hours on it, but I had never succeeded. I still remember when I first tried the harp, and when I'd easily gone through all the other songs, I raged, and eventually gave up after an hour or two on Through the Campfire, the final song. Except, Through the Campfire isn't the last song. There's one more which was supposed to be harder, which if you completed gave you a bonus reward. I did it first try. On January 28th, my friend got hacked. He went on a Discord server and gave his account name and email, which the fake verification bot used to access his account. They stole almost everything. He gave most of the remaining stuff to an online friend of his, but I held on to some of his minions and other stuff. He'd eventually return though. In February, I was really starting on the Skyblock levels grind. I'd do things just to get levels, which meant spending a lot of money on essence shops and Abaphone contacts. Speaking of Abaphone contacts, while I was doing one, tragedy struck. The contact I was getting was for the NPC that gives you commissions while mining. There was a separate item to remotely contact that NPC, and to obtain the contact, you had to give it back. I decided to buy a different one, so that I could keep the one that had sentimental value to me. And when I went to get the contact, I forgot to take the old one out of my inventory. So I'd lost the Pidgey I'd been using for 2 years. This was traumatizing. At the beginning of February, I managed to reach the milestone level of 250. Then the garden released, and I played it a little bit. I'd already maxed out my farming level, so there wasn't much to do for me that wasn't already done. I mostly just wanted to unlock all of the plots via the compost machine, so I kept that running for a while. I eventually unlocked all of the plots on July 21st. I also got a few of the early crop milestones, but didn't do them for too long because there wasn't much of a point to it. I also would mine cobblestone for mining fiestas. The first fiesta I attended, I'd just go to the crystal hollows and get as many ores as I could, which got me a boatload of money, but it didn't get me any XP really. so I would mine on the bridge in the Dwarven Mines the next time there would be a mining fiesta. And my lobbies kept getting stolen. I was fed up, and the next time it happened, out of sheer spite, I just stayed on the server. This dude had stolen my lobby, and apparently he was some live streamer, so he warped in a bunch of goons to make it impossible for me to continue, and tried to warp me out. Their brain-dead troglodyte fans claimed that I was the one at fault, because they were too stupid to go 5 minutes back into the YouTube stream VOD. However, I stayed, and eventually won out after like 30 minutes of arguing. In late February, the dungeons grind would finally start up again. I was quickly leveling up, and I was even playing without Duck sometimes. Soon after, on February 26th, while Duck had AFK'd at the end of the run, I dropped a handle. I had gotten incredibly lucky. It was only my 384th chest opening, when the handle was only 1 in 1,000. After this we continued the grind, so that I could get the scrolls to actually get my Hyperion. By March 1st, I was already Kata 37. Duck and I were grinding for multiple hours basically daily. On the 4th, however, Duck got an implosion scroll, which got him a few 100 million coins. That was awesome for him. Then, on the same day, I also got implosion. The day after, I got another handle. I was so RNG carried. After this, the motivation to play dungeons temporarily died down, and Duck was often busy. Though I was still playing fishing festivals to finish that avenue for Skyblock XP. I also started to trophy fish for diamond level fish. Just a couple days after my first in this push, I got the diamond mana ray after just 59 catches. This was really cool, as it was almost 10 times fewer fish than it would normally take. Unfortunately, mana rays were one of the easiest to get, so the RNG there wasn't too helpful. But 20 minutes later, I got a diamond skeleton fish after just 96 caught. This was actually really good, since skeleton fish is one of the rarer ones. The next day, I got another diamond, and then the day after, another. I was absolutely flying through trophy fish. At this time, I also started to become interested in the Skyblock lore, and did all the reading, which to be honest wasn't that much. In late March, the pseudo break from dungeons was over, and I was back to grinding dungeons. And you wouldn't believe it, but I got a 3rd handle in mid-April. Then I decided to get Carpentry 50, which is like the crafting item skill, but just buying things and then crafting them into higher value things and then selling them. It only took a few hours. After that, I decided to go after the Kudra follower armor. I raced up to 500k netherrack in just a few days. I was getting a lot of faction reputation along the way, because I knew I'd eventually have to go to the Barbarian faction quickly to complete some of the quests. However, I misunderstood how the reputation carries over, despite reading the wiki like 5 times. Meanwhile, I also prepared a craft that would come later, which took me several hours. I also began doing spooky festivals, and also maxed out the magma fish collection, which you get from doing trophy fishing. After that, I saw someone using a cool tactic to get slugfish, one of the more annoying trophy fish, and I decided to use that technique after I'd finally gotten a million netherrack. However, for that particular item, I also needed a million magma cream, so I'd have to wait a bit before getting the first piece of the Kudra armor. I also did some fishing to get all the fairy souls, since I was missing the ones that you get from fishing in the fairy grotto. After school ended, I was back to the dungeons grind, and also met a cool guy who was also on r/anarchy chess, which was my favorite subreddit. At this point, I was finally using Skyblock mods again, and not just the lunar client. I decided to make the change since I no longer PvP. Anyways, the switch was very frustrating, with many technical difficulties, such as chat being weird and annoying, and also ran into a lot of other GUI troubles, but I eventually got it. On June 5th, I finally got the 1 million mined ores needed to get all the possible XP from mining fiestas. I had to stay up to an ungodly hour to do so, like I had literally never stayed up so late. The next day I finally did Kudra after a year of not doing it. So, since I'd just gotten Magma Collection to 1 million, I got the Kudra follower boots. And then, I found a lobby where the volcano was doing an excessively big boom boom, and got Kudra pants too. The day after, I was back to trophy fishing, and got the really annoying trophy fish that you needed to wait 20 seconds for, the slugfish. I also got that one pretty early. The next day, when doing dungeons, it finally became better statistically to set my RNG meter to one of the scrolls. The RNG meter basically gives you higher chances of getting an item if you haven't gotten it. I actually messaged Duck saying, imagine if I got the other remaining scroll instead, since if I got the other one, then it wouldn't reset my RNG meter. Not even 15 minutes later, I got the other remaining scroll, which preserved my RNG meter. This was incredibly lucky. Unlike most of the other times that I got super lucky, this actually spurred me on significantly more, because now there was a light at the end of the tunnel, where it was impossible for the end of my journey to be many, many runs in the future. But in the middle of my grinding, something happened. The Rift had released, and it would be the most fun I'd ever had in Skyblock. Before we do that, we need to catch up on some of the other stuff. In the first 6 months of 2023, I put nearly 100 hours into parkour, trudging my way through the insane maps. Also, I would begin buying things from the shop with mana I got from beating maps. I would eventually build quite the collection of things. In spring of 2023, I participated in the first server-wide bingo event Hypixel had. I eventually blacked it all out, whilst achievement grinding along the way. I also made another friend who we'll call Potato. Originally, he was like the hundreds of people on my friends list who I'd shared one cool experience with and added them, and then forgot about them. Despite purging my friends list in September of 2020, removing a lot of people, I still had a ton of people on it. He continually reached out to me, and we would encounter each other on the forums a lot. He then wanted to borrow some of my Skyblock minions, so we exchanged Discord so that we could keep in touch even if we weren't both online. We also both happened to be doing a lot of Easter Simulator, and we'd share our crazy high egg counts, which was quite a bonding experience. We got pretty close, and now I had a second close friend online, though we aren't as close as Duck and I are. There was also this other guy that I'd helped in Skyblock, who was fairly awkward and seemed young. He kept wanting to play with me even though I didn't really want to play with him. I'd help him whenever he asked, but it took him a very long time to get the memo that I just preferred playing solo. I was quite active on the forums in 2023. At one point, I made this big post about a proposed Mayor Update V2, which I spent a day or two working on, which basically was a parody about how we should make Skyblock more realistic by making the mayor system worse. I also proposed a massive Abaphone update, which added a lot of new contacts, though unfortunately it got zero traction and admins don't listen. Anyways, by then, the Rift had been released. Now, as I go through it, somehow the recordings from day 1 and day 3 were deleted, despite the fact that I intentionally tried to preserve them. It's weird since half of day 2 is there, but whatever, let's get into it. It was like early game Skyblock, which I had so much fun with back in 2019 when the game was simpler. Except the Rift was a little bit different, in that it was 4-dimensional, or you only had a limited amount of time in each instance. Item upgrades were linear too, making it more understandable and digestible, where you didn't need to research to get the best items for you. It was a condensed version of the game and had one big questline. I began by hopping in and slowly collecting the armor. I systematically went through the beginning, making sure to get everything done in the first part before moving on. Once I collected the first time charm, which basically allows you to move on, I met a grandma who sounded exactly like me. I continued the quests collecting Enigma souls, which I found genuinely fun. Often, I just barely beat the quests before my time ran out. When I began farming collections inside the Rift, I reached the milestone level of 280, giving me a new prefix color, which looked very nice. I rounded the day off with the Mirrorverse, which was basically a room of puzzles, each with a sort of hard mode version to get talismans. Of course I did that, but holy crap, one of them, which was memory while also being good at parkour, was just the worst. It took 363 attempts. On day 2 I finished the Mirrorverse, after a couple of them were already solved for me by someone who was there earlier. On the final one though, no one could ruin it for me. So, after like an hour or so of doing it the hard way, trying to gauge where the parkour blocks were using the mirrors, I realized I could just point the stick at the blocks in the mirror, which would do a better job revealing them than whatever the hell I was doing. I eventually got all the Mirrorverse talismans, and then I moved on to do more of the village quests, and did all the farming I needed to do. I got 3 more time charms on day 2 out of the 7 total. I was blasting through the update, helping all the NPCs, and began doing the mining section of the update, where you would basically need to do mining to make your armor better. I also discovered a bug, which I had heroically reported. On day 3, I got 2 more time charms, so now I only had 1 left. I finished the mining part, and I finally maxed my pet, though I accidentally broke the item in the process. I'd also collected enough currency to buy a fish. So in Hypixel, there are fish, which are rare items that you can collect. I was kind of getting into collecting them at that point. Fortunately for my bank account, there aren't that many though. Anyways, yeah, I bought Zoop the fish, and it's actually the 50th ever created, so that's cool. On day 3, I was killing the slime boss a lot, and finally entered the vampire castle to begin the final stage of the update. I was preparing all the items I would need for that part. On day 3, I also met a guy who was trying to find a way to fish inside the rift. I decided to help him, but despite our best efforts, it was to no avail. But we did explore some parts of the map that you weren't supposed to be able to get to. Day 4, I began sending the new Slayer boss. After an hour of doing tier 3s, I had enough gear to take on the tier 4 boss. I would grind this for a few days, slowly maxing out my gear. I wasn't putting in well over 8 hours a day like I had on the first 3 days, but I was still grinding quite a bit. I quickly got all the burgers I needed, which was very convenient because they were rare drops. My drops were pretty good, however I still wasn't getting the piece for the final talisman, the dentist relic, because I got the burgers before everything else. I also later got one off of Loot Share, which was pretty lucky. Eventually though, on July 2nd, I was able to get the dentist artifact, which was like a full week after I got the last time charm to essentially complete the update. With the final major thing that would boost me, I now had the confidence to fight the tier 5 vampire. It was extremely difficult, and I died trying several times before. But this time it was different, and I beat it. And then I beat it a second time for good measure, so that I could use up the RNG meter, and get a book bundle worth 30 million coins. After this, the only thing left to do was to grind for motes, the currency, in order to buy stuff in Chen's auction. After getting a few million, I stopped because it was no longer interesting. Other than that, the only thing I had left to do was to max the new big collection with the new minion. It only took me until January. In mid-July, I would start up the dungeons grind for the final time. I was really close to level 40 as well as getting my Hyperion. While doing this, I also got Skyblock level 300, a major milestone. On July 14th, I was just one run away from getting Cata 40. However, I wanted to wait for Duck, so on the 16th, we entered a call. After just one more run, I was finally Cata 40, which also gave me an achievement. It was quite amazing in that moment to see how far I'd come. Going from someone who'd never completed a run and had to fake being competent, to an actually good player, who at times sometimes carried the party, even without good weapons. After a couple hours with Duck, the meter was full, and I dropped the last scroll that I needed. I finally crafted my hype, and then wasted a few million coins because I put some of the books in the wrong order. But I'd crafted the Hyperion. I'd finally completed my dungeons journey, at least for then. Although I was done with dungeons, my Skyblock journey was not over. Pretty soon I'd invest in Crimson Isle armor, and despite reading the wiki 5 times, I still didn't understand how attributes worked, which were basically stat upgrades on specific pieces of Crimson Isle armor. Then, on August 1st, Bestiary was revamped. You no longer needed to kill like 40 million of each mob to max it out. It was actually achievable and had a point. Unfortunately, fishing now had a Bestiary. So right before I had finished with fishing festivals, the goalpost was moved significantly farther. But whatever. I began doing a lot of Bestiary, which got me quite a bit of XP. First, I did the barn animals, and rounded off some high level ones that I had already basically completed. And I got rain slimes, a mob which only spawns when it's raining on the spider island, and I maxed it just as the rainstorm was ending. Like literally the very last one left was also the one that maxed my Bestiary milestone. I also decided to max out the Kudra shop so that I could get some more XP, and then I beat another level of Kudra, and got level 320, giving me a new color of prefix. On the 5th and 6th of August, I finished the Deep Mines, getting all the bestiaries on that island maxed. I had gotten my revenge on the very monsters that terrorized my Obsidian runs nearly 4 years prior. In September, the 300th Skyblock year was coming up, and the admins decided to hold raffles. I participated in every single one of them, AFKing a lot. When I wasn't AFK, I massacred some butterflies. My luck in the raffle was fine, but I only got one actually good item, Infiniboom TNT, which was basically infinite TNT. I also began working on more of that fishing bestiary, and then the day after I did bestiary for the Crystal Hollows. On the 24th of September, I finally decided to invest in the best fishing armor set. I put this to good use, flying through bestiaries in the Oasis area. There were a few mobs endemic to the region that I had to get, but wouldn't take too long. While doing so, I laughed at some noobs who died to the weakest mobs. I know, I'm a terrible person. On October 1st, I upgraded my flying fish pet, giving it a new rarity and thus much better stats. However, it costed 300 million coins, and I did not have that on me. However, earlier in the year, Duck had challenged me to a contest where at the end of the year, whoever had a higher level would get 500 million coins from the other person. I was apprehensive at first, but just before I got my first Necron's handle, my confidence grew and I accepted the challenge for 100 million, since there was no way I could have paid 500. I became even more confident, knowing that there was no way Duck would commit to it, so I increased the offer to 250 mil. Later, I'd even asked to bump it to 500 mil, but Duck refused. Anyways, yeah, it was not even close, and there was no way that Duck would even get anywhere near me towards the end of the year. So, on October 1st, he agreed to just end it there and buy me a vial for my fish to pay me early. I blasted through fishing bestiaries even more at that point, and the next day I was done fishing in the Oasis. Though I decided to get 3 extra rabbits over the max, which got me 88th place on the leaderboard for top kills. Pretty cool. In late October, whilst collecting my vampire minion, I finally reached combat 60. Duck had used to make fun of my low combat level, when I wasn't playing that much Skyblock, especially combat parts of the game. But now I had it maxed. The next day, I maxed out my gemstone powder. Though to finish up mithril powder, I still needed some time, and I eventually got it, which took about a month. Towards the end of October, the Great Spook was back, so I maxed out that in a week of minimal effort. And in late November, I bought a bunch of essence and maxed out the shops from the recent update, which got me a lot of XP. I also played a little bit of the garden to get started on the bestiaries of the new pest mobs. I didn't go very far with that. Though I did get the 100 million coin upgrade for the wheat hoe, for no reason other than I felt like it. In late November, the fishing festivals were back, so I killed more sharks for bestiary. On the 29th, I actually got the milestone of 5,000 sharks killed. I still had a long way to go before finishing shark bestiaries. Then, in December, there was the city project, which gave you a cool memento. I discovered it early and made sure to donate every day. However, on the last day, I had to be out of the house, which caused me to get it 6 hours late. Fortunately, I only seem to have dropped 120 or so versions, and still had a low number of 398. After the revamp, they changed around George, the NPC you sell pets to at basically kidnapping rates. And to get an extra level, you had to give him a Rift Ferret pet. Unfortunately, I gave him my original. However, despite them being easy to get, he still gave you 500,000 coins per ferret. I immediately went into the Rift and grinded for a bunch. There's a daily cap of points you can get from George, and this only worked for 2 days. And in the middle of my second spree, it was updated and fixed. However, I still got a free 75 million coins, which I used to buy a cool skin for my Overflux. I had money from fishing too, due to all the fishing festivals, which I used to buy more essence. And yeah, that's 2023 in Skyblock. As for general games, in October for the Halloween celebrations, Hypixel released the second server-wide bingo. It was harder than the last one, and I had some trouble. There was one in Blitz I spent hours agonizing over. At one point I literally killed the last guy, except he killed me first, so I didn't get it, even though it was a tie game. That hurt. Bow Spleef was also a massive pain, though after a few days I completed the bingo. And then bingo was back for winter, less than a week after I'd begun, I'd conquered the winter bingo. After that, I played some droppers since it had finally exited the prototype lobby and been released fully with achievements, and I also grinded Grinch Simulator. At that time, I decided to play some murder mystery, and I finally got the achievement that I'd been scammed out of. Basically, a little while back, Hypixel had updated murder mystery, adding new achievements. I was able to get most of them around update day, but there was one I should have gotten, but due to bugs it didn't count. Regardless, I got it eventually, and once again had beaten all of the murder mystery challenge achievements. In early January, I continued to play, until I got a tough tiered achievement that I grinded for. One of the major goals I had for 2023 was to finally complete all of the parkour maps and get the checkmark. I'd started off pretty close anyways, with only 100 insane maps left. I played a decent amount in July. Towards the end, I was also invited to have a hotel room on a well-known player's hotel map. I made my room look pretty and hid signs all over the place. But of course, when school started back up again, I'd slow down, even though I was less than 20 maps away. I was still playing a little bit, albeit slowly. I had kind of procrastinated, and at this point, it was the last 10 days of 2023. I had to work quickly if I wanted to achieve my goal. Unfortunately, this was delayed on December 22nd, when I lost my Pegasus boots. This was a big problem, as not only was I sentimentally attached to them, but they were also one of two ways I could cheese maps I found annoying. I could just put them on and get myself speed, or just do /speed and it would get me speed. I mostly didn't use this unless there were poorly placed checkpoints, and I could definitely do maps without them, it's just they were very convenient. Essentially, I went into practice mode and accidentally took them off. When I exited practice mode, they disappeared, because it gives you a different inventory when you enter practice mode. Whoops. And apparently I had lost my backup pair of Pegasus boots in the reset. Fortunately, you could buy Pegasus boots with qubits, an in-game currency that you slowly get through daily rewards or buying them. I wasn't about to buy them, so I scrounged up a few qubits, and with the help of someone who was online that day, who happened to be someone I was pretty close to back in like 2020, but hadn't talked to since, I managed to get enough qubits to buy a new pair. I wanted to dye them back to my colors, but unfortunately that had been broken, and I couldn't turn them back. That was sad. Anyways, I'd been powering through the insane maps, and on December 26th, I began the very last one. It was called Wool Young, and I'd been saving it since it was the hardest map. I even decided to not cheese it at all with speed. In the first 4 hours, I made good progress, despite wasting 30 minutes due to not realizing I could take a checkpoint early. I was so focused on the parkour and also the simultaneous YouTube video from a dude that slowly descended into the far right that I forgot basic common sense. I literally just forgot to right click. Eventually, I decided to stop for the day, and I was a bit over halfway done. I remember going into practice mode to see how much I had left, and I was shocked to see that I was not even close and had a long way to go before reaching the finish line. The next day, I returned, and after many failures, as well as countless setups and screenshots of figuring out the exact yaws and pitches, I had completed it. I reveled in my glory, and finally had completed the goal I'd set 56 months prior. Skyblock had slowed down a little bit at this time. However, on January 20th, 2024, I finally completed my New Year's cake bag. Essentially, every Skyblock year, you get a cake, and I'd been in the process of filling it since I'd started playing. I also had some money laying around, so I spent that on a bunch of essence. I also was playing a bit of trophy fishing, though it wasn't too much. Despite that, I finally got a diamond moldfin, one of the harder trophy fish. This one took me forever, and I had been on it for so long. What was especially annoying was that I'd caught like 20 golds, and on average you should get 1 diamond for every 10 golds. I'd been doing moldfin ever since I got that skeleton fish, so it was pretty weird to finally change fishing spots after I got the moldfin. The next day I upgraded my taming a bit, and then Marina was back in office, so I could farm some sharks. I also finally got Sulfur Collection to level 7 by hand, which allowed me to call Walter. March saw another Marina Mayor term, which allowed me to grind out a few more Fishing Bestiary levels. During this time I was also trophy fishing as well, and finally, on April 4th, I hit my 1000th Vanille. In my opinion, Vanille is the worst fish. To catch it, you need to use the worst possible rod. You can rod swap by switching to a better rod in the same tick that you catch the fish, but my ping is less than 1 tick consistently, so it never really worked for me. Thus, I had to do it the hard way. So not only did this make other trophy fish harder because you had to wait longer and have a lower chance of getting a diamond, but this trophy fish also had the same issues. Fortunately, because of a hero named Golden Dusk, who I'd met several times actually, there was a pity system where on your 1000th fish, you were guaranteed a diamond. He was unlucky enough to take like 2000 golden fish until diamond, which was the worst one to get unlucky on because it spawns once every 15 to 20 minutes, though it should not be your last by any means. Fortunately for me though, because of their bad luck, I was saved. The Diamond Vanille probably took about 100 hours for me. In April, the glassite mines were released, so more mining. It's pretty terrible honestly. I grinded the collections by hand in the first few days, getting Heart of the Mountain upgrades, which I maxed on April 20th. It's a really boring and repetitive update to be honest. In late April, the Chocolate Factory update was released. It basically formalized the in-game cookie clicker that didn't really save beforehand. Unfortunately, I missed the first season because it was released towards the end of the in-game spring season, which is when it's active. It took me until the 3rd season to realize that you could access the factory outside of spring. Apparently, the catching rabbits part is what's exclusive to spring in-game. In the background of everything, I made progress on the factory, upgrading my rabbit barn, prestiging the factory, and catching rabbits. May was very stressful because of exams. So, what did I do to escape? Well, I played Skyblock every second I wasn't sleeping or studying. I blitzed through bestiary, especially some of the Crystal Hollows fishing, since there was a bait that sped it up tremendously. At first I kind of messed up when doing it because I went to the wrong area to do it. But I leveled the worm bestiaries from basically 0 to max in just a few hours, aided by the arrival of another guy who made the process faster. After this, I continued to play the Glassite update more, slowly making my way through the collections, as well as making a little bit of money. I also needed a lot of powder to re-max my Heart of the Mountain tree, but I was also trophy fishing, and having finished Vanille, I could now focus on other fish that you get while doing the location-based ones. I began doing the obfuscated fish, and quickly got a diamond version of the second obfuscated. Basically, you can easily get obfuscated 1, which you use to get obfuscated 2, which you then use to get obfuscated 3. It's pretty annoying. I'd also fished so much that at this point I had 2 full sets of recombobulated fairy armor, each piece having like a 0.1% chance of dropping from a sea witch. Due to some minion crafting, I then finally reached Skyblock level 360 on May 22nd. After leveling to 360, I got a new prefix color, purple, which looks very nice. I also finally managed to win a couple rift auctions, which I'd occasionally bid on to no avail. I still haven't maxed out the rift, but other than the things that cost literally hundreds of millions of coins, and the expired fish, which are another thing to bid on, I'm done. Later in May, I also began grinding the bestiaries of seasonal fishing, which you can only do for a limited time. I got a lot of milestones on the 28th. Even after getting that wonderful green checkmark in parkour, I still needed to do the adventure maps. Long timed maps. Originally, I just wanted to do them once and take a time, but I eventually made the masochistic decision to get a time that I was proud of on all of them. There are 7 of them. In January, I did the first and easiest one, in just one sitting. However, this sitting was 5 hours long. I got a final time of just over 10 minutes, which was relatively optimized other than the invisible maze that took me a while. A month later, I did the second one. This one was not doable in one day. Over the next week, I'd accrued 20 hours on it. However, on February 9th, I finally beat it, with a time of also just over 10 minutes. This period was also a bit problematic for some reason because my computer was absolutely dying. I guess the map was just really bad performance-wise. On both of these maps, I'd beaten them 3 times, but only had been happy with the final one. However, the third map, which I did in April, was different. It only had a few checkpoints, so I'd most likely only complete it once because to get a good time, I had to do it flawlessly. This map also had issues like the second map, except it wasn't computer killing. The problem was for some reason that this map had special anti-cheats that constantly rubber banded you. Despite that, after a couple days, I beat it. In late May, I returned to housing parkour in Hypixel, but I didn't do that many maps. This was in preparation for the next map, Harry Potter, I had assumed it'd be a breeze. It was the shortest of the 7 maps. However, I quickly began to realize that despite being roughly the same difficulty as the previous 2, it'd take me longer than just 1 day. This was for 2 reasons, being 2 annoying speed parts, as well as just for some reason a general sense of me not being good at the map. It wasn't a hard map, but for some reason I just couldn't do it that easily. It was very weird. One explanation is that since it was short, I took more risky plays to get a good time, but I'm still not quite sure. On day 2, I began getting many deep runs, and was actually optimistic that I'd get it on that day. Unfortunately, this failed to come to fruition. I was certain day 3 would be the day. It was not. It took me until day 4 in 20 hours to actually complete it. There was another thing that happened on parkour which fucked me up. On one map, which I played on release day, it had this fun little thing where if you beat it, stepping on the pressure plate, it would not teleport you away. Although fortunately you couldn't get infinite mana using this, it would stack completions. I immediately reported it, but since my 69 extra maps thing was ruined, I decided to sit on it until I had 75 extra maps, giving me a new round number. In the spring of 2024, I had a strange urge to play PvP games again, so I did. I played a lot of duels as well as began to play Bedwars. While playing a game of the bridge, I reached Hypixel network level 250. This gave me the Black Plus, and was the final leveling reward on Hypixel. This was a milestone I'd been waiting for a long time. This spring would also have another bingo event, so of course I began playing it. It was only about a week of gaming until I finally got in the bingo max. I pissed off some people along the way too, which was pretty funny. I got several achievements, especially in Quakecraft and Paintball. I bought a ton of stuff in every game using up my coins, which also gave me a boatload of achievements. After this period, I'd gotten almost all of the Paintball achievements. I also worked on some Walls achievements too, which ended up causing me to have a fun video where I accidentally won a game. I worked on tiered achievements in some arcade games too, which helped me reach 15,000 achievement points, a major milestone. There was also a game called Sheep Wars that released, so I was playing that too. However, the culmination of my renewed interest in minigames and PvP materialized in my Bedwars grind. I had played a little bit back when I was younger, and had watched a fair bit of Gamerboy 80. But I didn't really like to play Bedwars because it was a bit too slow paced for me, and had no projectiles. Regardless, I decided to play it in April. I was playing through the Slumber Hotel update, which added a questline to the game. This was quite fun actually, except for the part where I had to get 250 Lloyd kills, which despite being early on in the questline, took up most of the journey of doing that questline. I won many games, working through the questline quickly, until on April 27th I met the hotel owner, finishing the questline. Except there were a few NPCs that I'd missed, so I actually finished the questline the next day. During the hotel line, I set out to beat all of the challenges, which continued after the hotel was finished. Originally, I had wanted to beat all the challenges once, but somehow I accidentally managed to win the first one twice because I wasn't paying attention, so I decided to do all of them twice. The first challenges were pretty easy and I made short work of them, however, they got progressively more annoying. Despite the frustration, I still had fun, with some hilarious escapes and victories. The first major roadblock was the one where you could only buy things made entirely of wood, and also pop-up towers for some reason. I would spam them of course, and after a few days I managed to get it by just running away constantly. There were a couple more that were painful to do, namely the Swordless Challenge, where you could only use a bow and a KB stick, as well as the Patriot Challenge, which screwed you completely. But I still managed to do them without too much resistance. The second particularly stupid one was a Stamina Challenge. You basically couldn't do anything, because you'd immediately run out of hunger, after which you couldn't defend yourself. However, breakthrough came. I was complaining in chat, and this guy told me to use the rotational item. Bedwars says items that go in and out of cycle, and at that moment, one of the items was the machine gun bow. For just 6 emeralds, you could arrow spam people. Also, this particular rotation seemed to last way longer than the others, though I wasn't complaining because I could abuse it and easily beat the challenges at the cost of my dignity. However, this didn't mean it was smooth sailing. There were still challenges left that were extremely difficult even with it, primarily the red light green light challenge, where you randomly had to stop moving. This made it very difficult to rush middle and get emeralds first, because I was essentially defenseless, but still I managed. The next stupid one was the pacifist one. You could only use fireballs to do damage. That one sucked. But I managed to get lucky a couple times and beat it. And on the same day, I did the last challenge. You had to win without taking damage. On an early attempt, I had failed immediately before winning. However, this still went smooth as butter, and I was able to complete it with ease, and then again. At this point, the urge to PvP a bunch had died down, and after beating all the challenges, I was done with Bedwars. Throughout the next several months, I'd play a fair amount of Skyblock. I got many more of my minions leveled up, and got a lot of fishing bestiary, as well as a lot of the garden pest bestiary. I would do my dailies and slowly build up my powder, recompleting the heart of the mountain tree. I bought lots of pets to increase my level, and I did a lot of hoppity as well, getting many new rabbits and progressing. It took months, but eventually I finally got the elusive El Dorado, which was the most annoying rabbit to get. I had fairly good luck with the divine rarity rabbits too, which was very convenient. In early June, exactly 1 year after I got the first 2 pieces of Kudra follower armor, I decided to get the rest of it. And due to my good planning, this mission was successful. I had to do a fair amount of Kudra runs to get the teeth necessary though, which took a few hours. Kudra follower armor and the Kudra follower relic, the talisman that goes along with it, show edition numbers. I ended up getting the 4999th edition of the plaque, which was very cool. After that, I spent some time grinding quests for the barbarian faction, and eventually became a hero to both the mages and barbarians. After that, I was starting to wrap up shark fishing. I was on what was supposed to be my very last fishing festival, except I forgot to drink a tonic that makes me fish faster. Because of this, I failed to finish before the festival was over, and had only 4 more sharks to kill before completing it, which was just so sad. But it's okay, there was another fishing festival for this marina term. Except I missed it, and I had to wait for the next marina election. And then Marina got elected without the perk that has fishing festivals. I was fuming. But in a stroke of luck, the Mayor V2 update had been released, which changed around the perks that Marina had, which allowed me to get it. Also in the summer, there was a celebration of Skyblock's 5th anniversary. I participated in it, and it got a pretty low edition balloon, though it could have been lower if I didn't mess up the dialogue. I ended up spending some time grinding the shiny pigs, and was able to apply many upgrades to my farming tools because of this. One of the revamped mayors was Foxy, who now had a carnival. On my 4th attempt in one of the games, I got a score that was so high that I got 4th place at the time, on a super unoptimized round. See, the carnival was basically just a lottery where good minigame concepts had a lot to be desired because there was just so much RNG. After a few days of taking suggestions and working on a post, I eventually was able to complete a post that saw a lot of praise about how to improve the carnival. On June 14th, I was bored and decided to try to get a good time on the Woods Racing in Skyblock, which is an in-game race. The next day, after some mild grinding, I got 27th place, and there's thousands and thousands of people who have completed this. I was also doing glassite collections slowly during this time, and on July 25th, I finally completed the collections. I was fairly active on the forums in 2024, and I actually caught quite a bit of flack. Firstly, I made a second Hypixel Games tier list. It was actually reasonable, respectful, and well made, since by then I'd played all the games. Yet, I still got a ton of negative reactions because people are lame. Oh well. I also got into a disagreement about Skyblock's decline, but that was measured and mostly respectful. However, this was occurring simultaneously to some drama. So there was a controversy about the coming Skyblock update, which was about dyes and making them more common. The forums were in an uproar over basically nothing, and I decided to contribute to the conversation with my in-depth and thought-out critique. I don't give a fuck and I don't care. I prefer an update that actually changes things. Thank for listening. Now, at first I got an agree and a well-deserved creative reaction. But then the shitstorm came in. Someone replied saying that I was like many people who were just being unnecessarily mean to the admins who were just doing their best. I decided to do a little bit of trolling because I found it funny that people were taking me seriously here. I replied that admins aren't people and thus should work 24/7. At first people laughed, but then I think they started to take it seriously because people were making these long replies about basic human rights and that admins are people. So eventually I decided to break character and explain that yes, I do believe in workers' rights and that no, you can't outflank me on my deeply held beliefs. But that got downvoted too, because people were just so mad at me. Some people got real mad and started going to my other threads and getting their friends to downvote basically every suggestion I've ever made. Like they downvoted year-old suggestions alongside triple downvoting me. Basically, in Hypixel, you can only give someone a negative reaction 3 times in a 24-hour period. Giving someone a triple downvote is usually not good etiquette, especially when it's because you can't understand their sarcasm. Generally, you don't just triple downvote someone because they're not funny. So, when I noticed that these bozos decided to do that, I called them out. And despite this being public information, a few forumers that I generally respect also triple downvoted me. Ooh. So I got into a big spat with them like, no please, sir, don't call your friends to triple downvote me, you're really proving your point so much. Basically, I was just provoking them because I'm a diva like that. And since I wasn't initially in the wrong, that gives me permission to be as much of an ass as I want, of course. I'd also had a pretty large battery for this kind of thing because I'd been getting into fewer Reddit back and forths at the time. As bad as I may seem in all this, I did take the high road. I didn't downvote anyone back. I know, I'm kind of a hero. Sometimes it's tough being the best, but I manage. And then the post got deleted for public shaming because Hypixel hates it when people call out others regardless of the circumstance. Since it was deleted, these negative reactions were all in vain, and I came out on top, preserving my reaction score, and thus the riveting story had come to an end. I'd also been doing some other things. I did a teensy bit of Blaze Slayer, and Potato helped me get all Master Mode completions. After this, I started to do Diana events. I dropped a few Chimera books, which was nice. At first, I had insane Inquisitor luck, meaning that I'd quickly dig up the mob that can drop it, though my Chimera luck overall was slightly less than average. In October, the second museum update dropped, and there were a lot of new things that could be added to the museum. So this helped me get rid of a ton of my fishing drops because now there was renewed demand. I also made a huge profit on another thing. Luminous bracelets are an item that was added to the museum. They cost about 30,000 coins to make and were selling for 20 times that, and in super high volume. But unfortunately, the money making died down because some moron tried to undercut people by selling the bracelets at 300k for no reason. They fucked up the bag for literally everyone. Oh, and also due to this update, Duck made like 400 million coins by not listening to me, so that was pretty cool for him. Late into the year, I started to go to more dark auctions, where items are sold at exorbitant prices. I was in one lobby where someone really wanted a Midas weapon for 100,000 coins because funny. Unfortunately, someone fucked it up, and their efforts failed. After that, the final auction of the round was to take place, the Flower Minion. Flower Minions are about 50 million coins. I bid 100,000 coins, the starting bid at first, and I guess everyone in the lobby was so distracted from the prior auction or wasn't paying attention to something because I managed to snag the minion for 100k. This was one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me in the game. It required like 20 people to simultaneously not pay attention or decide to not care. I made some more profit too with another good bid, but nothing like that Flower Minion. I did some Enderman Slayer and got some pretty lucky drops. I was going for Judgment Core so that I could craft my Terminator. I got 1 drop that was twice as rare as Core and 4 drops that are twice as common as Core. So despite overall good luck, not in the right things. But then I got Judgment Core and was able to craft my Terminator, the best bow in the game. I was also upgrading other gear at the time, getting better attributes for my Aurora armor and equipment. Late in December, I returned to trophy fishing. I was able to get Obfuscated 3 and Soulfish to Diamond. I actually had a lot of leftover bait for Obfuscated 3 because I got it pretty early, so I decided to use it up and I quickly got another diamond, which was quite fortunate. Now, the only trophy fish left was Karate Fish, and it is no longer particularly difficult. Admins made changes to trophy fishing earlier that month, and not only did they make the pity system trigger at 600 fish instead of 1000, but they also doubled the rate at which you get Karate Fish, so it won't be too bad to get. In early December, the admins finally updated and completed the rift. I was busy, so I had to wait to play it though. Fortunately for me, I had a really bad stomachache and was not able to go to school, which allowed me to not only become not busy by catching up on my work, but also allowed me to game. I jumped back into the portal and was greeted with a fucking mining update. Fortunately, there was other stuff too. I beat up a guy, though he started to beat me up, but I was able to clutch up and really beat him up with all the handicaps activated. I did the new quests and the frustrating, poorly built parkour. I killed Icarus and proved my vast intelligence to Oscar Schindler. Much to my dismay, I also had to deal with another reverse murder. though I was able to get my revenge. It was cathartic. Then I entered a series of trials to become Wizard Man, the deadbeat useless superhero who never does anything. And yeah, I completed the update in one day, though I did have to wait to earn free will, basically a minion upgrade. I got some guy to craft me an Inferno minion since I don't have the craft unlocked, and my stupid minion decided to stay with me instead of adventuring, allowing the general minion upgrade. Duck had made a 250 million coin bet with me again in 2024, and it was that he could surpass my net worth by the end of the year. I accepted it because it'd make up for me not having accepted the earlier 500 million bet. Duck made great progress, but it wasn't nearly enough and I ended up winning. Though he did have me anxious at some points, which I was not expecting. And yeah, that rounds off my Skyblock journey so far. In summer, Hypixel released an update to their Zombies minigame, a new map with new achievements. So I gamed with Potato, and we got these achievements. And it wasn't just zombies, but we played together quite a bit in other miscellaneous games. Also in summer, I rounded off the Quakecraft achievements that I was gunning for. And of course, I did the summer bingo. I also decided to go after the Dropper achievements, and was able to complete all the tiered achievements for Dropper, getting many good times on the maps with constant improvements. Sheep Wars had also released, and I went for all the achievements, including the tiered ones. I made good pace and took less than a few weeks to get them all. However, what I found more interesting was my pursuit of a 6-kill game. In Sheep Wars, there are 2 teams of 6, meaning that the most kills you can get in a game is 6. I had a game where I almost got 6 kills, but then threw, which lit a fire in me to get a 6-kill game. I had many close calls, but it was just too hard. I was nearing the end of my tiered achievements, but then I finally got it. In an intense game, I was able to get kill credit on every single member of the other team. In October, I finally got the tiered achievements for the last remaining simulator game that's still around, Halloween Simulator. I didn't do the bingo though, because there was no reason to. It didn't give you an achievement and the rewards were kinda bad. In late fall, Murder Mystery was updated to include a new descent into madness, which was basically quests to do going down a tree, alongside some cosmetic updates. This update was actually good and there was nothing that was bad about it, and I began making progress on it. Finally, Speed Builders was released, where you have to memorize a build and then build it from memory. I went from horrible at it to okay, and got many of the achievements before I stopped playing. I still had 3 more adventure maps to complete before the year end in Manacube. I had procrastinated until winter break. First up was Magical Paradise. It had some speed bits and some effects, kind of like Harry Potter, but longer. I decided that I wouldn't just keep going through runs resetting after every fail, but would practice the entire map and then get fast runs. This strategy proved successful, and in little time I was able to get a good time. It was even sub 10 according to my timer, though the actual time was not sub 10 unfortunately. Next was Hyacinthum. I was expecting a nature-based map, but it was actually a futuristic metropolis-based map. I wasn't looking forward to it because it was by far the longest and had the most space between checkpoints, but I actually began to really enjoy it. I employed the same strategies as in Magical Paradise and was quickly getting solid runs. Eventually, I was on pace for a barely sub 15, with only 1 death. However, on the penultimate checkpoint, it teleports you to a dropper. Problem is, you have to go backwards and collect the last checkpoint before doing the dropper. I forgot to do this, and thus failed my run, since you need to collect all the checkpoints before finishing. I spent 4 more hours that day, slowly tilting more and more, and was not able to get a good enough run to finish it, especially since my standards were raised because I was not about to spend several hours for a worse run. I could have mentally kept going, but my arms were literally hurting and I had to stop. On the last run of the day, I almost was able to complete it, but I failed at the end. The next day, I was finally able to get a good run. It was a minute faster and it only had 2 deaths. I only lost 35 seconds to all of my mistakes throughout the run. So it was pretty good, and I was happy enough with it. Even though I was happy, I might have just gaslit myself because I literally chanted, "This is the run," over and over, literally 69 times. I'm not even exaggerating, I counted. When I failed an easier part costing me 20 seconds, I almost crashed out, but I decided to accept it. And 9 hours of playtime after I was scammed, I was done with the map. I probably reset some runs that could have also made that, but I learned to accept my fate. Finally, Infernum was up. This is the second shortest adventure map, and I was not a fan of it. I found the way that it was built to be extremely annoying. I eventually got a good enough time on New Year's Eve, though I did end up missing a shortcut. But I completed all the adventure maps before 2025, thus succeeding in my goal. It says that I have about 1,030 hours, but like 50 or 60 of those are AFK. So I was able to effectively complete Manacube parkour in under 1,000 hours, which is pretty nice. And that brings us to now. It's been a great 10 years, and I have no plans on stopping Minecraft. I plan on doing Enderman and Blaze Slayer fully, and doing Kudra. I'll continue Glassite dailies until I max the powder tree. Speaking of which, admins are planning a Glassite fishing update, which of course will prompt me to do more fishing bestiary. I plan on finishing the garden update, while also progressing in the chocolate factory, getting all the rabbits. I want to get that damned karate fish so that I can be done with trophy fishing. And most of all, I'm excited to play the foraging update in Skyblock when it comes out, which I've been waiting years for. As for other parts of Hypixel, I'd like to complete the murder mystery tiered achievements in the Descent in Madness. I also plan on playing their new games as they come out. Same goes with Manacube maps. I'll play them as they come out. And who knows, maybe I'll find new aspects of the game that I enjoy. Minecraft has a special place in my heart, and it's given me immense joy over this past decade and 5,000 hours I've put into it. I've met so many amazing people throughout my journey, and learned so much over the years. You know, as the saying goes, Minecraft teaches us that no matter how ridiculous the odds may seem, within us resides the power to overcome these challenges and achieve something beautiful. And one day, we'll look back at where we started and be amazed by how far we've come.